I guess I'll go ahead and begin. My name is Kristen Presall. I'm from News Channel 5, and it's my pleasure to be out here for the 4th annual HEALS program. It is such a tremendous event. Healthy eating, active living, you can't go wrong. I think in a city this size, to where we constantly see folks moving to the downtown area, you want to remind people how important it is to get out and walk and bike ride and use our greenways and any kind of trail and just stay active. I'm going to be helping moderate today's program, so we're going to be hearing from some tremendous speakers. We're going to be giving out awards and recognizing folks who are doing a terrific job of something similar already. So we invite you all to definitely ask questions to folks afterwards, find the speaker, go ahead and try to just educate yourself best you can and take this kind of message you learned today and just spread it to everybody you know. I'll go ahead and start the introduction. I said we'd be hearing from some tremendous speakers, and we will begin with hearing from Dr. William Stephen Paul. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Dr. Paul. Everybody knows him. He's the director of Metro Health Department. But just for folks who don't know his background, he's been director of the Public Health Department here in Metro since July of 2007. And previously, he served for nearly 15 years at the Chicago Department of Public Health. He's Bachelor of Science from Stanford and an MD and Master of Public Health from the University of Illinois. Now, he completed internship and residency in internal medicine at the University of Wisconsin and is board certified in internal medicine and infectious diseases. Now for the part to where we could brag about him. The accomplishments of Metro Health Department under Dr. Paul's leadership range from the largest immunization campaign in recent history for H1N1 influenza to the award of a 2-year, $7.5 million stimulus grant to promote environment, policy, and systems change to increase opportunities for healthy eating and active living. He is a chef, he's a runner, he's a husband, a dad. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Paul.
Morning, everyone. I'm not going to show slides. I never go up in front of a group and don't show slides, but I figured today there's going to be a lot of great visuals, and I don't have that much to add. Well, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be director of the health department in Nashville, the IT city. Did you read that? Or we're the IT city. And I think we're starting to become kind of a IT city when it comes to healthier living and being a healthier place to live, and I'm excited about that. At the health department, it's our mission to protect and improve health and well-being for everyone in Nashville. And our vision is people creating healthy conditions everywhere. And now, yeah, that's our vision for our own department. We do a lot of different things in public health, and it'll take a long time to list them. But it's also our vision for Nashville, is people all over Nashville taking action to make Nashville a healthier place and create healthy conditions. And that's, you know, as I look out on this group, it's kind of an inspiration, because the schools, people in the design community, people of faith, people in their own neighborhoods, people working on statewide issues, policy issues, and also people who are just have a passion for making Nashville a healthier place. And this is the first time I've used an iPad to try and give a talk, so bear with me. This is the 4th year that we've come together as a community for a Healthy Eating, Active Living Summit. The health issues that brought us here in the first place are still urgent. We feel like we're making progress. There's some numbers here and there that make us feel like we're making progress, but we still have major issues with obesity and with diabetes, children with diabetes, increasing medical costs, and there's so much impact that we can have by prevention on the overall health and well-being of Nashville that it's really important and really urgent that we keep this up. I do think we're witnessing change in Nashville. I'm very excited about it. I'm proud that your health department was involved with the community's Putting Prevention to Work effort. You'll hear about some pieces of that today. And that we've been able to play a significant role. But obviously this is a community enterprise, a community project. And we know that no one specific change is going to turn things around. It's not all about food in the schools, and it's not all about sidewalks, and it's not all about workplaces. But all these things together are creating change in Nashville, and Nashville is becoming a healthier place because of that. A few recent examples: the bee cycle is up and running. We're excited about that. You know, something that you might not be aware of in terms of healthy change in Nashville is that the birth hospitals in Nashville are all making changes so that it's easier for moms to choose to breastfeed. Breastfeeding is healthy food, the best thing for an infant, and in the long run it prevents obesity and chronic disease. And so these hospitals are really making change and tracking things so that every, well, at least 4 out of 5 hospitals, that there's more of an opportunity for infants to get off on the right foot in terms of healthy eating. Schools continue to make great change towards healthier food. There's a new vending machine policy which will put healthy food in the vending machines by 2014, and that's great. The theme of this year's conference is Health in the Built Environment. I was going to show 2 slides. I'll just describe them for you. One of them is a mountain road with guardrails on it. And I show and I say, well, how many of you believe it's personal responsibility to drive on the road? Yes. Well, you know what? We put up as a community, we put up guardrails anyway because we think it's a good idea. In the context, the built environment does shape our behavior. Personal responsibility is important, but there are decisions that we make together as a community for our health, for our safety, and for our well-being. And one of the big examples, I'm from Chicago, that I like to show the slide. It's a big hole in the ground in black and white, sepia tones. In Chicago, they had a problem 100 years ago with typhoid and cholera. The sewage was going out the river and out into the lake, and the lake was the source of the drinking water. And this wasn't working out very well. They were having a big World's Fair coming up. And I guess there's a whole variety of things they might have done. They could have created water boiling clubs or just created a lot more hospitals or what have you. Well, in Chicago, they dug a new river. They reversed the flow of the Chicago River. This is like one of the biggest engineering feats that any community's come together to do. And that just impresses me because it's an example of what communities can do if they choose to become healthier places. And so as we talk about the built environment and health, sometimes it seems like such a huge project. It's going to take a generation to sort of make the change that we want to see. On the other hand, change is happening now, and if you know, there's nothing wrong with communities deciding to think big and to really make changes, and in the long run, improving health and well-being in that way. I've probably talked enough. Is the mayor here yet? Morning, Mayor Dean. Okay. Boy, if I saw you, I wouldn't have gone on that long. We have a great day lined up. We'll have Gary, and you'll hear about each of our speakers. I'm really excited to hear Gil Penalosa. We've also got some awards, a healthy lunch. Alice Randall, the best-selling author of Ada's Rules, will speak at lunch. We also we'll make it local as well as global. We've got a panel to talk about local examples of healthy design, and Rick Bernhardt's going to connect this all to Nashville 2040, the general plan for Nashville. After the summit, we can walk around and see a healthy built environment down here in downtown, and then there's going to be the reception to open the Nashville Civic Design Center's Shaping, Building, and Becoming exhibit. I want to acknowledge the members of the Planning Committee, especially the Nashville Civic Design Center and Metro Planning Organization for their leadership on this event, but also the entire Planning Committee, Belmont University, TSU, Metro Parks, Rebuilding Together Nashville, Healthy Nashville Leadership Council, News Channel 5, especially Kristen, Metro 3, for being media partners. We have financial support from Blue Cross Blue Shield, Baptist Healing Trust, the Metro Health Department, Metro Planning Organization, and the Metro Planning Department. And then there are a number of really important people here, and we want to thank them for leadership and for being here and support. Councilman Bedney was on the Planning Committee. He's here. Councilman Bedney? There he is. Councilman Peter Westerholm is here. We've got 2 members of the Board of Health here, Carol Etherington and Dr. Alicia Batson. We've got members of the Healthy Nashville Leadership Council. Janie Parmley was on the planning committee, John Harkey and Ted Cornelius, and forgive me if I've missed any. But now I have the honor of introducing Mayor Carl Dean. This mayor has been a great champion of healthy building. It's true, healthy building, healthy living, and healthy building. He's behind the Walk 100 Miles Challenge, the 5K Challenge, the Mayor's Workplace Challenge, but also Complete Streets policy and really a lot of healthy change all over Nashville. And so it's been a pleasure to be in Nashville, the IT city, with Mayor Carl Dean as mayor. And I'm going to stop talking and let him greet you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Paul, and it's great to be with you all here. I want to thank you all for coming here this morning, and I want to also thank Councilman Bedney and Councilman Westerholm for being here. It's great to have a Metro Council that has been so supportive of the various initiatives we've done to make Nashville a healthier city. And I want to take a moment to recognize the Metro employee who will be receiving a Nash Vitality Award later today. Sandy Bivens, who is not with us, who is sick, but I think it's important that we recognize her, has been the superintendent of Metro Parks' 4 nature centers for over 35 years, and is also the recipient of the Association of Nature Center Administrators 2012 Leadership Award as the top nature center director in the country. That's a remarkable achievement, and is a great thing for our city. So congratulations to Sandy for all the great work she does and continues to do for our environment and for our city. And congratulations to all the Nashville Vitality Award winners who are helping shape a healthier city. This is the 4th HEALS Summit that I have attended, and each year I'm excited to see increased participation and learn more about the past year's community initiatives that have helped make Nashville healthier. The topic of this year's HEALS Summit is about health and the built environment, a topic that I care a lot about. As mayor, I have made health a focus of my administration. The health of our citizens is directly linked to the overall success of our city. Healthy citizens are more productive, and health affects how our children do in school. When businesses and individuals are choosing the place they're going to locate and live, people want a city that supports a healthy, active lifestyle. And you can look at some of the recognitions Nashville has received just this year. I mean, if you start with the beginning of the year when the travel magazine Condé Nast said there were 5 cities in the United States, in the world, not in the United States, we've gone beyond that, in the world that you need to visit in the upcoming year. They listed Seoul, Korea, Amsterdam, Toronto, Ontario, New Orleans, and Nashville, Tennessee. So I know what you're all thinking. You're wondering, you know, how the heck did Seoul and Amsterdam make that list? But it speaks really well to Nashville when we receive that kind of attention. Then, of course, just last week, the New York Times said that Nashville is the now city, the it city. It is the city which everybody's talking about. And I think a big part of it is health. The fact that people recognize that they want to live in a city where they can get outdoors, participate in athletic events, whether it's walking, biking, running. They can enjoy the river. They can be part of a city. And that's a major thing that's changing in our city, and that's a positive. And that is a big draw for us. And that's going to be more and more important as the years go by. Now, many say that health is a personal choice, and I agree with that. We make choices every day. Every morning when I wake up, you know, you make a choice whether you're going to do your workout that morning. You're making your choice whether you're going to go out and run, whether you're going to walk, whether you're going to do something that morning. It's a choice you make about getting out of bed. And some mornings are more difficult than others, particularly on cold days. And it's kind of easy for me. I love to exercise. It's really one of the highlights of my day, the most relaxing part of my day. But, you know, we also make choices about what we eat. And there I'm not quite as good as I need to be. You know, I'm one of those guys who, when the family orders a pizza, I don't relax. I get all nervous because I'm kind of worried where that last piece is going to go, whether I'm going to get it or not. But those are the personal choices we make, and we really should never lose track of the fact that there is this element of personal responsibility in health. It's a vital, vital part of it. But when you stop to think about our kids, when you stop to think that 38% of the children in Nashville are obese, that our state, which is making progress, still ranks, toward the bottom of the list of states in terms of health as it relates to obesity, we've got to do something. And it's easier to talk about personal choice when we talk about adults. We all have a lot of information. We can get information about what we eat and what we do and what the consequences are. But kids don't get that. They're bombarded with commercials, with tempting food. That's not good for them. They live in a culture where you can spend a lot of time watching TV, you can spend a lot of time playing video games, you can spend a lot of time at your computer and never get outdoors. And so it's pretty much incumbent upon us to help them make decisions that are right for them, help them get the information they need, and help them develop habits that they're going to stick with them for their entire lives. And that is really, I think, a moral responsibility we have. I also believe that the government plays an important role in making sure that people have healthy choices available to them and that they have the information they need to make those choices. It's great to say you should exercise, but if you don't have a place to exercise, if you don't have a place to walk or to ride a bike, then those choices don't mean all that much. It's my goal to make Nashville a city where the healthy choice becomes the easy choice. This includes making changes to our built environment where sidewalks, greenways, bike lanes, and places to play are easily accessible to all of our citizens. I strongly believe that investing in the built infrastructure is a key to fighting the obesity epidemic. And don't think of it as anything other than an epidemic. I mean, this is one of the most important health challenges facing our entire country. If it was anything other than obesity, we would be going to dinners and raising money to help fight this disease, which has enormous consequences for the health of our citizens. And when you stop and think, and you should never lose track of this, that there is a direct correlation, not something that people have theories about. There's a direct correlation between diabetes and heart disease and obesity. Since taking office, we have invested about $130 million in public infrastructure to promote healthy, active living, which has included not only sidewalks and bikeways, but also community centers, parks, and multimodal streets and public health facilities. I've been asked to take this time today to highlight some of our accomplishments in the past year as it relates to health and the built environment. And again, I want to acknowledge the council's role in this, and Peter and Fabian particularly for being here. These projects, which are all part of capital budgets that we submit to the council and operational budgets to the council, have received wide support. The council gets it. I'll start with progress we made related to parks and open space. Last summer, we opened Cumberland Park. The 6.5-acre interactive park draws thousands of visitors a week. It encourages physical play and activity and incorporates the natural beauty of the riverfront and adds to the vitality of the East Bank, which are all important to us. We continue to add parkland and park facilities to meet the growing needs of the community. The park staff work hard every day to maintain those resources and to run programs that encourage people in the community to get healthy and to be active. The work they do in partnership with the Metro Health Department is making our city an even better place for families and individuals to live, and that's really what our ultimate goal as a local government should be. To that end, another major park project that occurred in 2012 was the acquisition of a 600-acre farm in the bend of the Stones River in the Donaldson Hermitage area. This is a very special piece of undeveloped land that sits between three key existing park areas. Two rivers to the east, Peeler Park and Taylor Farms to the north, just over the Cumberland and Madison, and Stone Hall and Ravenwood to the west. This is a huge step in accomplishing the goals of the Open Space Plan, which calls for a public-private approach to preserving 22,000 acres of sensitive natural areas and floodplains by 2035. We released the plan in the spring of 2011, which represented a cooperative effort between the Metro government, the Martin Foundation, and the Land Trust of Tennessee. And when we made the announcement, we also announced the acquisition of Cornelia Fort Air Park, adding 135 acres to Shelby Bottoms along the Cumberland River. Then, towards the end of 2011, we acquired the 184-acre Ravenwood Country Club, immediately adjacent to Stone Hall. Altogether, with the Stones River Farm, we have now acquired a total of 1,500 new acres of parkland since I took office. Moving on to transportation infrastructure. Another accomplishment this past year was the opening of the 28th 31st Avenue connector. Of all the projects that we have completed during my tenure, this ranks near the very, very top for me in terms of projects that I'm proud of and I think are important for the city. This bridge connecting 28th Avenue in North Nashville to 31st Avenue in West Nashville is more than just infrastructure. It's a symbol of bringing our community together in many ways. As you know, 40 years ago, a decision was made to build an interstate, and that interstate essentially cut North Nashville from West Nashville. It isolated the African-American community from the predominantly white community in West Nashville. It made it more difficult for people from Vanderbilt to get to TSU and to Fisk, and for them to get from TSU and Fisk to get over to Vanderbilt, Belmont, and Lipscomb. The bridge literally reconnects two parts of Nashville that were divided by the interstate. In addition to the bridge has an economic and social benefit. It also has environmental impacts. It is the second complete street in Green Street in Nashville, the first being Dederick Street. The green features on this street include planting areas along the sides and medium that will act as rain gardens, filtering and reducing stormwater runoff to help keep our water supply clean. And the lighting features include solar LED lights. The connector was designed to accommodate all forms of transportation, not only cars, but pedestrians, cyclists, and transit. It includes 6 new bus shelters, and with the connector's opening, MTA launched a new bus line called the University Connector that connects 6 of our city universities. I took the bus in this morning, the number 7 Hillsborough, and one of the changes in the last few months is that as you come in on the number 7 and you go through Hillsborough Village, they announce get off here to get on the University Connector, a crosstown connection that hopefully will increase use of our buses. With this project, we've set a new standard how to design and construct a signature street in our city. This bridge connects another investment that I believe will transform the health of our citizens in years to come. On the north side of the 28th Avenue connector, construction is currently underway on a new main public health facility for the Metro Public Health Department, which HCA is developing through a partnership with the city. We look forward to visitors commuting across the corridor and visiting the new state-of-the-art Lentz Public Health Center in the very near future. In terms of accomplishments for 2012, I also want to mention the progress we've made on becoming a more bike-friendly city. An innovative project that I'm excited about is the Nashville B-Cycle project. Nashville B-Cycle is our city's new bike share system with 190 bikes at 20 automated kiosks near downtown. We launched this project in mid-December. The city's B-Cycle program is not only the beginning of a new transportation service in our city that will make getting around our urban core easier, it's also a major milestone in our effort to make Nashville a healthier and more sustainable city. The B-Cycle launch could not come at a better time. Last fall, the League of American Bicyclists awarded Nashville the designation as being an official bike-friendly city. That's something, some of these honors and awards just come naturally to the city, but this is one we pretty much wanted to get and worked hard to get done, and I was really excited when it happened. I can tell you that there's a B-Cycle kiosk out in front of the courthouse, and I just recently had this experience about last week where I went to a meeting at the Country Music Hall of Fame, And one of my staff members, Matt Wilshire, who heads up economic development, came to the meeting, and on the way to the meeting, he had a meeting at the chamber, and he got a bike from the kiosk with the normal Nashville winter weather of 70 degrees that day, and rode the bike down to the convention center, to the Chamber of Commerce, came out of the Chamber of Commerce on Commerce Street, picked up another bike, and rode that one down to the Country Music Hall of Fame, which is sort of an example of how this can be used for day-to-day work, but it's also a great amenity for our citizens and also for our tourists. We're excited to have received honorable bronze status, and we join cities across the country who are leading the effort in making Nashville more bikeable. Nashville's B-Cycle launch last year also coincides with the opening of the Music City Bikeway. This is a continuous bicycle route that links Percy Warner Park in western Nashville to Percy Priest in eastern Nashville. This route utilizes a combination of greenway trails, bike lanes, park roads, and signed share roads to create bicycle connections between major parks, densely populated neighborhood areas, and downtown Nashville. The entire route is approximately 26 miles, and it's designated by a special Music City Bikeway signs to direct users. I've ridden the bikeway, and it's really great, and it's very safe. And if you want to get exercise, I would encourage you to do it. You see a lot, and people tell me you go from the two Percys, Percy Warner to Percy Priest Dam. Before I close, I want to mention that to really make a dent in our city's obesity rate, I feel it's not enough just to build infrastructure. We have to help inspire our citizens to embrace a new way of living where being healthy and active is something they choose to do every single day. And this is why it's important to me to take an active role in motivating a healthy culture through education, programs, and events. Because of the success of the first Walk 100 mile campaign in the spring of 2011, last fall we relaunched the Walk 100 mile campaign to challenge our city to once again walk 100 miles before the end of the year. In the first go-round, we had about 4,000 participate. And this last time we had a few fewer people. There's a little more low-keyed. It was more getting neighborhoods and different organizations to sponsor walks and then to encourage people to walk on their own. There are well over 30 Nashvillians who have completed both walks for a total of 200. What is most inspiring to me about these walks is hearing personal stories about how individuals are working health into their everyday lives to attain the 100-mile goal. For example, a 95-year-old woman walks the hallways of her senior living center every day, and she sent me a letter saying that she had done this and reached the 100-mile goal, which I think is pretty incredible and shows a great degree of commitment. Her activity coordinator puts up markers to help her keep track of how far she goes, and she met the 100-mile goal for the second group of walks in early December. Another participant took the challenge in 2011 and has since then, has kept walking, has since that time has walked over 2,000 miles and has lost more than 40 pounds. He walks along the Richland Creek Greenway 8 miles every day, rain or shine. Last November, we hosted the second annual Mayor's Challenge 5K, which once again drew over 5,000 participants. New this past year was a kids' fun run, which was a success, bringing over 300 kids and some parents who walked or ran the fun run. Speaking of kids, last spring I wanted to create an event targeted specifically toward youth. Walking and running are great, but we know that childhood obesity is a great public health concern, and we wanted to teach kids that they can get exercise in a lot of fun ways. We partnered with the Tennessee Titans and located an event called the Mayor's Field Day with the Tennessee Titans at LP Field. So we opened up the NFL stadium on an afternoon, on a weekend, for kids to come in and use it. We had Titans there on the field help running the events. And I can tell you that when Eddie George walks onto the field, people still pay a lot of attention to him. We had over 3,000 people attend that event, so we're doing it again this year. We haven't officially announced this yet, but we'll go ahead and announce it right now that on Saturday, May 4th, We will host the second annual Mayor's Field Day once again at LP Field, and once again the Titans will be major sponsors and major supporters, and Titans players will participate. In addition to these events, we found another innovative way to help achieve our health goals. This past spring, we created something called the Mayor's Workplace Challenge, where businesses complete online scorecards that rate how healthy, green, or involved in the community their workplace is. The website includes toolkits, and businesses can update their scores as they make changes to policies and programs. Over 100 businesses are participating in the challenge, and we continue to reach out to more. You can learn more by visiting Mayor's Workplace Challenge, onereallybigword.com. Using grant funds, we recently launched a free mobile app that includes GPS-based maps of all our city's parks, greenways, park routes, community centers, and other health-related infrastructure, including bikeways. It's truly a one-stop resource for active living in Nashville. It's available at the Apple App Store and the Google Play for Androids and other smartphones. All you have to do is just go to the App Store and download it. It's all free. So in closing, let me say I'm proud of the great work that everybody has done and the great partnerships that have been formed here in Nashville. The health costs and consequences of bad diet, lack of exercise, obesity, and diabetes will take years to turn around. But Nashville is making significant strides and important strides. To succeed, we need sustained effort and coordination across our community, which is what this HEALS Summit is all about. I applaud all of you for being here today to learn about the tools for creating a healthier Nashville and for a desire to collaborate to fight the obesity epidemic. It will take all of us to turn this crisis around. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope you all have a wonderful and warm day. Thank you.
Mr. Gaston, of course, sorry about that, is the design director of the Nashville Civic Design Center and a lecturer with the University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design. Now, he was a principal contributor to the Design Center's book, The Plan of Nashville, Avenues to a Great City, published by Vanderbilt Press back in 2005. Gary co-authored the center's recent publication, Moving Tennessee Forward, Models for Connecting Communities, and is currently working on Shaping Healthy Communities, which will be published by Vanderbilt University Press later on in 2013. Gary served as the project director and executive producer of the documentary film Design Your Neighborhood, which was funded in part by a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts and was screened at the Nashville Film Festival in April of 2012. Great accomplishment. Gary served as the Education and Outreach Co-Chair on Mayor Dean's Green Ribbon Committee, the Nashville Open Space Plan Committee, and currently on the East-West End Connector and the area south of Broadway Master Plan Committee. Now, Gary was named named the Next American Vanguard by Next American City magazine in May 2010. One of only 30 young urban leaders selected from across the country, and was a member of the 2010-2011 Leadership Nashville class. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Gary Gaston.
Thank you very much. I am going to just give a brief overview of what aspects of the built environment do play a role in health, and I'll just go through a lot of images and kind of explain them. But first, I just wanted to kind of expand on what Dr. Paul said in his introduction related to the history that is enjoyed by the partnerships between planners and public health officials. And I think if you look at this image, I chose this because it is a good example of what the top image of what Nashville was like in the late 1800s. And it was a very dirty city, like most cities were in the country. Pollutants, factories were located within very close proximity to the residential, and the sewer systems were not like they are now. It was dumped into the river. Pollutants from factories were dumped into the water. And that really was a recognition of public health officials coming together with planners and architects to solve a problem that increased and benefited the public health of our cities. Somewhere along the way, that sort of changed a little bit, and public health, I think, and planners did not work so closely together A lot of zoning decisions were made that caused some of the issues that we saw where single uses, residential was no longer located next to commercial uses. And you'll see a little bit of that in my talk today, but it's really very exciting to be coming back together as professions. And I think having people here today from both health and the built environment is really exciting because we are working so closely together now. What I briefly want to introduce to you is the transects and the idea of transect zones in Nashville. The planning department uses the transect, which is an organizational attempt to classify different geographical areas of the county that all share characteristics in the physical and built form. So in Nashville, we have 7 transect zones. They go from the natural areas, which are the least disturbed, sensitively, environmental sensitive areas of the county. These include our large parks like Radnor Lake, the Percy Warner Parks, Shelby Bottoms, all the large parks that we have. Next, we move up to the rural areas of the county, and these are the rural zones that are undisturbed farmland, lots of trees. They're generally located farther away from the urban core, but they can be very close proximity to the suburban zones. Suburbanization was a phenomenon that occurred post-World War II primarily, and it consumed what was previously rural land, where we developed it in the suburban context of the suburban communities that we all sort of grew up with in the 1950s and 60s. And here you can see some. Notice how they are located adjacent to areas that are still considered rural. Then we have our urban neighborhoods, which are historically the neighborhoods that developed around the downtown core. These were initially serviced by the streetcar system, so you get a very dense community that has a grid and sidewalks, and you could walk to most of the needs that you had within your community. We've seen over the last 15 years a lot of returning to our urban neighborhoods and redevelopment that's happened in those communities, which is a good thing. The core is considered the downtown core of Nashville. That's the core transect. And it includes pretty much everything within the interstate loop of downtown. So you have high-density office, residential uses that are located in typically mid to high-rise buildings. Centers are areas that are spread throughout the county that are primarily the shopping districts. They're located at the intersections of our major arterial roads. They include places like Rivergate and Green Hills. Districts are large single-use areas like universities or office parks or even industrial zones that all have sort of different ways of dealing with this community surrounding, but they typically have their own planning practices and sometimes their own security needs. So in the 2010, the Civic Design Center really began the conversation about health in the built environment with the work that we were doing. And we have partnered with the Metro Public Health Department on a project called Shaping Healthy Communities. And this is really going to be a project that has looked at the built environment and health and will come out with a book this year. But in the process of doing that, we began to look at the built environment features that do play a role in affecting public health. So I just want to go through those briefly those six environment factors of the built environment that do play a role in affecting public health. So neighborhood design and development is the first one. And this is an aerial view of Davidson County. So as you can see here, we have downtown is really in the very center of Davidson County. And as you radiate out from that, you have the urban neighborhoods, the suburban zones, and then the rural areas. So the neighborhood design and development really is, I think, the core principle of how we design our communities. As you can see here, this is an example of urban neighborhoods. They're very close, tightly knit street system with alleys and sidewalks. And this sort of form of house and housing development that takes place there. This is an example of a suburban community you can see here, there's not a lot of connection like you have in the urban communities between those neighborhoods, although this is not always typical. This is kind of the development pattern of those. and as well as shopping opportunities are usually disconnected from the residential that might be very close, but in this instance, one would have to walk out to the main route. There may or may not be sidewalks here to access the shopping, and then as you can see, commercial opportunities are isolated from one another in general. A new development pattern that is taking place in many areas of the city are developments that are trying to mimic some of those historic neighborhood patterns. So this is an example in Lenox Village, which is in Davidson County, of a suburban development that has taken the form of a more urban community. Now, does anyone know what street this is? Just curious. Charlotte? But it's Charlotte, but it could really be a lot of our urban corridors because they do look somewhat the same. So, sorry, I'm right. As a pedestrian, this probably is not very appealing to anyone to walk down. It's primarily accessed by the car, and I think as a city we're trying to move towards looking at sidewalks and infrastructure in a way and bringing buildings up to the street so that the pedestrian experience is safe and it's more appealing to walk. And of course, by walking, you will have the physical activity that will lead to better health. In transportation, Nashville is well served by our road system here. We are the crossroads of 3 interstates. We have very well maintained roads, and you know, it's fine to be a driver here. But increasingly, it is becoming more congested as a city, and as we grow over the next 20 years, we're expected to expand by 1 million people in our region. This is only going to get worse. So increasingly, we are starting to look at different forms of transportation that offer alternatives to the single car, and that is through things like our bus system, the addition of our new BRT lines, and the coming east-west connector. Of course, we have rail here in Middle Tennessee, and we also have the Music City Star, which is a great asset for us. It is a commuter rail line that connects to Lebanon. We have a downtown circulator system that offers free 3 routes in the downtown core that connects to different areas of downtown. Bicycling is an alternative form of transportation. Increasingly, as the mayor said, we are being recognized on the investments that we're making in our bicycle infrastructure. And of course, walking is a form of transportation, and we need to make sure that our walkers feel safe and secure and are not taking their lives in their hands when they have to walk. Housing. We are seeing more and more diversified forms of housing in Nashville, from downtown high-rise, higher density living, to the redevelopment and renovation of some of our public housing developments around town that are located within urban communities. Different forms of urban infill housing, the townhome that brings higher density to urban neighborhoods, perhaps on vacant lots or in lots that were underutilized before. Affordable housing types that can come into a vacant lot that offer not only high income living, but also can give housing within urban communities to people that might not be able to afford just living in a high-rise or a higher cost condo. Urban neighborhoods are experiencing new infill types of development. And of course, a house like this, which is located in the Lenox Village neighborhood, which is the suburban context, but in more urban, close-knit, higher densities. Food resources. We have a downtown farmers market here that's amazing. I think the focus on food in Nashville has been tremendous over the last decade, and local food is becoming a big thing here, or has been a big thing. Really starting to recognize the value that we have on farmland here in Davidson County, I think is a huge asset for us. We don't have as much farmland as maybe some of the more rural counties of Tennessee, so how do we preserve that land and make sure that it's productive and is producing food for us locally? And also the idea of agritourism. So this is an example of us going out to visit a farm as an event and really recognizing the value of farm space and seeing what happens on farmland. Food trucks is a phenomenon that's come about in the last few years. It's very popular. Pop-up markets that are happening all around town that go into neighborhoods and bring food to people within those communities. The recent council law change where you can actually sell produce that you produced on your farm. Things like community kitchens where we can cook food that can be canned, or business entrepreneurs who are dealing with restaurants or food businesses can actually make a business of it and start to make money from that, but it's all locally done. The idea of walkability and pedestrian safety. I like to use this image because, I see this all the time, people trying to cross the busy intersections of our 5-lane arterial roads where they're, in this case, I don't know if you can tell, but she looks like she's very frustrated. I would be too. She's stuck in the turn lane. There's a bus stop here. The next intersection is way up here, so the easiest way to get there is just to cross the road. But so many people are injured or are sometimes killed when they have to do something like that. I think this was just 2 examples of sidewalks that do not function or do not work correctly. But we're starting to see more and more of this type of thing. And where these sidewalks go in, people use them because they're safe, they're attractive, and if you give people the opportunity to walk, I'm a proponent of saying that they're going to do it. And then, of course, the mayor talked about offering events for people to get out and to socialize in communities and to come together and learn who their neighbors are and get to know each other, but also do something physical while they're doing it. The Walk to School Day is an annual event that happens in Nashville, but this is something that should be happening every day in schools. Kids should be able to walk to their schools, should be able to bike to their schools where it's possible, and we need to be building infrastructure that connects to our schools and our communities. And finally, open space and parks. This can be anything from a very rural, peaceful space to a highly programmed event. We offer these types of spaces throughout the county, and I think it's thrilling to hear of the 1,500 acres of new park space and open space that have been acquired during the mayor's term in office, the new park that opened on the riverfront, and things like the bicycle program at Shelby Bottoms. These are all wonderful things that are happening in Nashville. And if you have any more questions about this, I'd encourage you to please contact us at the Nashville Civic Design Center. And I just want to give another brief plug for the opening of our exhibition, which is today at 4 o'clock in the Atrium Gallery of the library. It's an exhibit that's focused on the idea of the health in the built environment. And there's also an opportunity for you to give your your feedback on ideas that you have for making Nashville a more healthier city. So with that, thank you. And I just want to, I get the opportunity to introduce Gil Penalosa, who I have to say, I had the fun time of giving him a walking tour yesterday afternoon with him and his daughter, Laura, who, Laura is on her way to Australia early next week, and she wanted to make Nashville one of her last stops before she left the country. She's not been before. So it was a lot of fun to hang out with them and to be able to show Gil some of the great projects that we're doing downtown, and so he can kind of hopefully weave that a little bit into his talk. I realize that I am aging because it's hard for me to read this. Gil he advises decision makers and community leaders on how to create vibrant cities and healthy communities for all. His focus is the design and the use of parks and streets as great public places, as well as sustainable mobility. He's the executive director of the Canadian nonprofit organization 8 to 80 Cities for the past 6 years, and Gil has worked with over 130 different cities on numerous continents. And I think we are thrilled to have Gil here today to talk to us, and he's going to be making a few talks while he's here. So we're going to get him around the city and talk as much as possible. His full bio is on the back of the program too, and help me welcome Gil Penalosa.
Well, it's really nice to be here. It's like the New York Times said it last week, Nashville is the it city. But one of the nice things about cities is that you are never finished. So you can always continue to improve. And actually, yesterday when I came in and I was on the taxi, I asked the taxi driver if a lot of people walked or biked in Nashville. And he was from Ethiopia, and he said, "Oh, no, it's freezing, it's very cold." So I thought I would add a couple of images to the presentation, because I was doing some work in the Caribbean about a year ago in January, and they said, "Oh, we don't walk because it's too hot." And that was January, and I'm based in Toronto, so when I took the plane back to Toronto, so weather is always an excuse. I don't know if maybe from the lights, if we could dim down the lights a little bit here towards the screen. But let's get back, because I think this is a great opportunity to, on the theme this year, Healthy Eating, Active Living Summit is health and the built environment. Health and the mayor and Gary mentioned a lot of great things that are happening in Nashville, as well as some of the issues and some of the problems and some of the challenges. For example, one of the things that really bothers me is that more and more across the world, especially around North America, the zip codes seem to matter more than the genetic codes on how we live. You know, for example, Baltimore, if you go to Baltimore and you live in the Inner Harbor, the life expectancy is 62 years. But all of a sudden, if you're in Baltimore, in the North Baltimore, the life expectancy is 82. And there are many more. This is Cleveland. This is same county, 2 neighborhoods in the same county. And all of a sudden, you got one county where the life expectancy is 64. And then we go to another county where the life expectancy is 90. Can you imagine? The other day, I asked an audience, and I just gave the profile of the community without saying where it was. And I said, what do you think? And they said, oh, that one, the 64, that's probably Haiti or somewhere in Africa. And I said, where is the 90? They said, oh, it's probably Sweden or Denmark. And I said, no, you know, both are Cleveland, both are in the same county. How can it be? And then all of a sudden you find that, talking about the built environment, obviously in the one that is 64, there are no sidewalks, there are no parks, there are no grocery stores, only convenience, 4 times as many convenience stores in the low income than in the high income. And then mostly they buy garbage in the convenience stores, and there is no fruits or vegetables or anything. And even if there were, maybe there's not even money to get it. So it's something that really is worrisome about the built environment. You know, even the U.S. military is also becoming an issue of national defense. The U.S. has rejected over 140,000 people because they're too overweight, that even after the training, they will not come down to a proper weight. You know, and this has an issue of diabetes type 2 and chronic heart disease. You know, 27 million, 68 million with hypertension. So 1 in 3 deaths of cancer is related either to obesity or lack of physical activity. So some facts on Tennessee. You know, on Tennessee, on obesity is the 3rd highest in the U.S. So even though sometimes, actually, I think that when you start getting a lot of awards, it's worst. It's worse to get the awards, because then people say, oh, we are so great. We got an award here, and the New York Times, and the other, and then people become very complacent. So sometimes it's better to say, no, we're not. Because, you know, when you had the 3rd highest obesity rate for the population, or the 4th for children, or when you got the 6th hypertension, you know, it cannot be such a fantastic place. You know, there is a lot of work that we need to be done. And you know, by the way, I'm both Colombian and now I'm also Canadian. And one of the things that Canadians are known for are being politically correct. That's one of the things that I'm not. I'm not very politically correct. And actually, I think that's why you invited me to say a few things, you know, because, you know, the inactivity. Tennessee is the state with the highest inactivity in all of the U.S. So it's very clear that it's not about getting awards on being a nice cycling city when you got less than 2% of the people cycling, or when you have pedestrian issues such as the photos that Gary showed us. I mean, by far, any place where people are physically active is places where people walk or bike as a normal part of everyday life, period. It's not about where they do the Olympics or where they have the best football teams or whatever. That has nothing to do with the population. The most activity people do in the Olympics is they just click and they change from one channel to the other. If you study the Olympics in the last 30 years, none of the places have increased levels of physical activity after that. But you know, it's where people walk or bike as a normal part of it. It also is not about just playing soccer once a week. No. But also it's nothing really critical. You know, now we used to say, you know, no pain, no gain. But now it's very clear. You don't have to do 2 hours or 3 hours of exercise. Just 30 minutes a day. That's all, 30 minutes. Which is great. And you don't even have to do those 30 minutes at the same time. You can do 15 minutes in the morning or 15 in the afternoon. So there are many, many ways to actually do it. You know, and when people are talking about the financial cost, an obese person costs almost $1,500 more per year in medical cost. So it's huge implications. So there is very clear that there are some symptoms that in Nashville we gotta develop a shared sense of urgency. But also there are other symptoms. We are talking about the schools. Look at this. In 1970, the number one way that people got to school was walking or cycling. And then all of a sudden, the auto, look at this. It's increasing and increasing. So we're going to be talking about some. And then, there is too much traffic for Billy to walk to school. So we drive him. And then everybody starts thinking the same thing. And then, of course, there's more traffic. And then poor Billy is multiplied. And then everybody's been driving. So, and there are more problematic symptoms. Too many people drive to the gyms to walk on the treadmills. And actually, some symptoms don't even need a lot of explanation because there are more problematic symptoms. 24 hours fitness. And actually, people go in here and they pay a monthly fee. And what do they do once they are inside? Yeah, they walk on a treadmill. My God. And maybe in many cases, it's because our neighborhoods are not nice. In many cases, it's because we don't have nice sidewalks, because the intersections are dangerous, or the sidewalks have cracks, or is not safe, and so on. So it's one of the things, that why we need a better built environment. So we're going to be talking this morning about cities for people. And someone might say, oh, Gil, cities for people is so obvious. Of course, there are cities for people. No, it's not so obvious. Let's think, the U.S. is probably the wealthiest country in the world. And we have been building the country over the last 100 years. And, there are very few areas, even very few streets within our cities, where we would allow a 6 or 8 or 10-year-old boy or an 80 or 90-year-old person to just wander around. And I don't know what's more incredible, is that the fact that it happens, or the fact that people think, that's normal. That's a normal part of life. Almost 100,000 pedestrians get hit by cars in the U.S. every year. That's totally crazy that we think, that's part of the cost of living in 2013. It's not. We know how to eliminate those pedestrians being killed or being hit. Those 100,000 are not killed, are hit by cars, reported. About 5,000 actually died. Can you imagine, in the last 10 years, over 50,000 pedestrians have died. And nevertheless, it seems like if the pedestrians were orphans, no one cares about them, unless it's our daughters or our parents or our spouse. Other than that, they just have a small note on the back of the paper saying, oh, an unfortunate accident. No, they're not unfortunate accidents. Most of those could have been avoided. For example, we built the streets, and instead of having 90-degree turns, we cut the corners. Why? So that the cars can turn faster. But when the corners are 90 degrees, then it's very close for the pedestrian. All of a sudden, you cut the corner, it's twice as far for the pedestrian, and on top of that is the cars are going to go much faster. Putting a small aisle, like an island in between when you got 2 lanes in each direction, if you just put an island to cross the street, 57% of the accidents go down if you have an island. Because, the older people that have walkers, they can walk in two times. Instead, if you don't have an island at the middle of the road, you have to try to walk at once. Simple things like that. Putting lights, more lights on the intersections. So I'm going to show you a few other things. So we really got to work on this, how to create cities for people. And actually creating cities for people is not so much about economics or engineering. It has to do more with people. How do people want to live? How do we want to live? That is the key question. And that, first we got to have a shared vision of how do we want to live. And then we decide on the built environment. Then we decide how do we want the neighborhoods, how do we want the streets, how do we want the parks. For example, we're amalgamating schools all over the U.S. Why? Because the boards of education have cash issues. And because of a short-term cash issue, then we amalgamate schools. And we say, oh, instead of 2 principals, we have 1. Instead of 2 custodians, we have 1. Yes, but when the schools are bigger, the catchment area is also bigger. So it's much more difficult for the kids to walk or bike to school. Also, when they make friends, their friends are going to live further away as well. So it's also going to be more difficult. So if we, the size of the schools, or where do we locate the schools, in the cheapest lands next to a highway or whatever, it's not just an issue of the Board of Education. I mean, all the citizens really should get involved, and the mayors and the councilors and the politicians. They shouldn't say, oh, it's not my role, it's the Board of Education. No, how we're going to live, it has a lot of impacts on our schools. So, this morning we're talking about recreating cities. And when we're recreating cities for people, there are some ingredients. It's like if you're going to do a pasta. You boil some water, you put on the pasta. You don't put any salt or butter or nothing, just the pasta, and it cooks. And it's a spiceless pasta. And then they give you a spiceless pasta one day, and you eat it because you are very hungry, and maybe the next day, and so on. But then you get sick of the spiceless pasta. So what do? You got a couple of options. Either you get nice ingredients and you make a nice pasta, or you go somewhere else. So you got the ingredients, and now that's better, right? So, in so many ways, the cities also have some ingredients. And there are some spice cities, and there are some spiceless cities. And people do not like to live in spiceless cities. What is a city of spice city? It's one that is nice for the children, it's nice for the older adult, it's nice for everyone. Which one has a spice and which one is spiceless? Can you imagine how people used to get around here to get eggs or milk or bread, and all of a sudden they do these kind of things? In the middle, they completely break it up, the neighborhood. This building won architecture, they won a lot of awards, architectural awards. And it's a horrible building. Who would, if you want to meet someone, you go to a new city and you want to meet a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you're not going to go to that street. It's a horrible street. Instead, look at this one. It's some of these things. We build this, we talk about sustainability, but we build these parking lots that are used a few hours, one day a week, when we could use it throughout the week for other things, farmers markets, and doing aerobics, and doing all kinds of things. Look, this is another church that uses the place 24/7. So, this park, and it's not about the money. This park costs a lot of money, but you go there, there's nothing to do. You take a few photos, and you never go back. Instead, this one doesn't cost a lot of money, and people go back again and again and again because there are so many things to do. So I guess you start getting the issue of what it is that we are talking about. So what are some of the ingredients on a city for people? The most important is the pedestrians. Why? Because human beings, that's how we were made. We are pedestrians. All of us. Every trip begins and ends by walking. Every trip. We walk to the car, we walk to public transit, we walk to the bikes, we walk to places. So every trip. And actually one of the happiest days in our lives is when we have a child, and the boy or the girl is, for a few months, is crawling, and only the poor baby only sees the floor. And one day gets up and takes a step, and we say, Sebastian walked, or Laura walked. And then we call our parents, and we call our brothers and sisters and friends, and we tell everybody. And that life is transformed, And when we walk, we use all our senses. It's great. We see the children playing, and we hear the birds singing, and we go in front of a coffee shop, and we smell the aroma, and we see people eye to eye. So pedestrians got to be first, got to be our top priority. If we have a city that is good for pedestrians, we're going to have a good city. Because also, pedestrian is not only about short distance. Although the short distance is nice. Some people say that short distance, that an indicator is a neighborhood where a child can go out and get an ice cream and walk home before the ice cream melts. So that's an indicator. But it's not only about short distance, but it's also about enjoyable walks. When you have buildings like the one we saw, it's a horrible building. It's a horrible walk. So we want to have also a nice walk. So pedestrians by far is the top priority. But they're also the most vulnerable. That's why they got to be our top priority. When we saw that poor woman screaming, really worried in the middle, usually when there is jaywalking, it's because we're missing a crosswalk. But we got to have some of those priorities. And very similar to pedestrians are cyclists. I say that cycling is just a more efficient way of walking. If you're going to go for half a mile, you walk. But if you're going to go for 2 or 3 miles, then you bike. By the way, here in Nashville, over 50% of the trips are less than 3 miles. So over 50% are bikeable. and many are also walkable. But if you're going to go further away, then you take public transit. And public transit we're investing billions of dollars across the US in public transit, all over. But we gotta keep in mind that public transit will never pick us up in front of our houses and drop us off in front of our destination. So if the cities are not really walkable or bikeable, you know, in the Nashville region, over 90% that uses transit today, they get to transit walking or cycling. So it's something that is really, really important to make those links. And then the glue that links walking, cycling, and transit is nice public places. All of a sudden, look at this opportunity. Like I see that now you're going to be doing a BRT here in Nashville. What a great opportunity. But each one of the stops shouldn't just be a stop. You know, all of a sudden you put a flower place and they sell newspapers and it gets better. And then you put a table to play chess, and you put a water fountain, and you put a coffee place, and so on. And then it becomes like a meeting place, a destination place. So not only for the people using transit, so you improve all of the neighborhoods, so it becomes really, really nice. And then when you got all those four together, all of a sudden you got a city for people with sustainable mobility. So in so many ways, this is the kind of links that we need. We need the safe place for the cyclists, the safe place for the transit, for the pedestrians, for everyone. And then we're going to have spice cities. By the way, walking, cycling, and transit, they got to be best friends. Best friends. So, you know, I'm amazed in so many cities that people, the pedestrians and the cyclists have a lot of conflict. There shouldn't be. They got to be best friends. Maybe because both are so weak politically that then they think that it's easy to fight with each other. As well as transit. You know, the three of them gotta be best friends because at the end of the day, you know, by the way, there is no city in the world the size of Nashville that have solved the issue of mobility through the private car. None. So, and you're gonna get 1 million more people. So things are not gonna get better, things are gonna get worse. So the reality is that over the last 60 or 80 years, we have been building cities thinking more on car mobility than on people happiness. And those two concepts are incompatible. And thousands of cities have tried to build mobility around the private car. You know, if that was an option, we would have hundreds of examples. And people do a second floor and it gets full, and then they build a third level and it gets full, and so on. We're going to see some examples. But so we really got to invest in walking and cycling and transit. And actually, I was looking through your document that a plan for 2035. It's a nice plan, except the 2035. Most of the things could be done in the next 5 years, not in the next 25 years. Because all of a sudden, when you put 25 years, people say, oh, it's in the plan. It's in the... No. Let's do it now. Let's do it now. There are many things that could be done. So let's keep that in mind. So I really want to thank the organizers of Nashville Hills for inviting me. And yesterday, I had a session where we had about 7 mayors from the metropolitan area, and we had some people from planning and transportation. And tomorrow, we're going to go to Oshler, is it? Oshler? And Julie and Gary have organized a really nice session, and then we're going to be meeting with planning people. So thank you. And also, the people from health and Julie has sent me so many really good documents and I do think that lots of things are happening. Lots of things, especially lots of planning is happening. So that is really good. But by the way, when things are happening, you gotta be worried. I'm gonna tell you, there is a warning, because you know, sometimes it's more difficult to change from good to great than from bad to great. Because when things are good, people are more complacent. People say, oh, you know, things are okay, you know, why change? You know, oh, we have always been building the roads like this. We have been doing neighborhoods without sidewalks. So people are more reluctant to change. So try to shake that up and say, no, we're not that great. That's also the awards effect. You start getting awards and you start being more complacent, so be careful. I'm going to tell you a few things about my previous life when I was commissioner of Parks and Recreation in Bogota. And then I'm going to tell you a few things. I'm going to take you through many examples around the world of things that now we're doing with the 880 cities. And then we're going to focus on how to change and 5 elements to create change. And I'm going to end with some parks, what makes parks and public places nice. And someone said, oh, Gil, here in Nashville, we don't like anybody coming in and telling us what to do. Of course, no one likes anybody coming in from anywhere and telling them what to do. I'm just showing examples, hundreds of examples, so that you pick one thing here or there and you see, okay, what could work, what could not. But obviously the shared vision of Nashville, the shared vision of Tennessee, it has to be done locally. It has to be done. No one is going to come parachute in and try to say anything. That would be disrespectful. But at the same time, it's always good to hear ideas because people are doing things in many places. So people come here to learn some. You can go other places to learn about others. And also, I'm not talking about Bogota because I think Bogota is ideal. No, it's far from ideal. Obviously, I wish it was like Nashville. But when I go everywhere, people always say, oh, Gil, we don't have the money. So I'm just going to say, Bogota has about 1/10 the per capita income than Nashville, or 1/8. And nevertheless, we did interesting things with 1/8 the per capita income. Actually, in 6 years, we built 5 metropolitan parks, 50 zone parks, over 800 neighborhood parks. For example, we did this park. The Pope came and gave a mass here for 1 million people in the heart of the city. And then the city put a wire fence around. There was nothing. There was not a sidewalk, nor a bicycle path, nothing. He planted a few trees, but there was nothing around. And why nothing happened in 27 years? Because there were issues, there were problems. But we gotta remember when we work in the public sector that the citizens are paying us every other week is to get things done, not to have 20 reasons why things cannot be done. And that is what sometimes we got all of these issues. No, of course there are issues. That's why in 27 years nothing happened, and in 36 months we transformed this into this. This is where the Pope came, and 13-hectare lake, and we built bikeways and sidewalks, and we built places where people could go running, lots of these children's playgrounds, areas for events and for concerts and wave pools, and places to run. And a gigantic park, but also recreation is not only active, but it's also passive and contemplative, things that people could do in teams, but also things that, and the water is like magic. Like having the river here and all of this is something really great for Nashville. But getting the use, and the mayor was talking about having activities. It's very important because the success of parks and public places is not only about building and designing, but it's about the uses and the activities. I find that in many, many cities, sometimes it's a lot easier to find the millions to build the parks than the thousands to make them work. But without the thousands to do the movie nights and to do the concerts, the jazz festivals and the concerts and the buskers and so on, the parks don't really work. So that is something and it's working together. Here we're going to do surface parking. And the Board of Education was thinking of a library. So we said, why don't you do a library with an underground parking? Instead of the conflict, oh, I'm the board, I don't talk to the municipality. No, let's work together. And all of a sudden, so we started doing the library with an underground parking, and it was a win-win because the park got the parking lot, but not only the parking lot, got a wonderful public library. So it's something that is quite nice. And it's a park that is very well used. But some other parks, I love all kinds of parks. One that I really like are the linear parks because they connect. They go through low income and high income and residential and commercial. This one is 18 miles across the city. And we started in one of the wealthiest part of the city. And the wealthy people wanted flower shops. So we did put some flower shops. And we started crossing and walking and wayfinding maps and restaurants and so on. And this is where it ended. This is before in the Bogota River, and this is after with linear park all around and playgrounds. And we interconnected one of the poorest parts of the city with one of the wealthiest parts, and that was also quite nice. And in 3 years, we built 174 miles of protected bikeways, and we went from 28,000 to over 350,000. And all protected bikeways are the ones that are physically separated from the cars. Some of them are along the rainwater drainage, so that always there has to be a linear park around, others next to the streets. And actually, in something that is very, very important is to create a network. If we don't build a network, it's not going to click. People need to connect places of origin to destination. And some of these places were so poor that here in Nashville, for you, it's hard to imagine, even in your worst nightmare, how poor these neighborhoods were. Look at this. But also look at how transformative this could be. And by the way, why do we need really nice pedestrian and cycling facilities? For 2 reasons. First, for safety. But second, to dignify the pedestrian or to dignify the cyclist. Last week I was working in Guadalajara in Mexico, and the new governor that is coming in March, he wants to do a whole sustainable mobility and parks plan, and he's asked me to lead it. And we went out for a walk, and all of the sidewalks full of cracks, full of barriers and posts and things. I said, look, we're sending a message to the people. That is your worst option. If you have any chance, you got to move into a car. So we got to dignify the pedestrian, because constantly we're telling the pedestrian, you are a second-class citizen. When we see the sidewalks like the one that Gary showed in his photos, look at some of these issues and how this was transformed their lives. No pavement, no sidewalks. So this is also about being consistent. If we say pedestrians are first, and then cyclists, and then cars, we didn't have money for all of it. So the city had to choose. Either we do pedestrians and cyclists, or we do cars. And the city decided to leave that for a future administration, the cars. So we need consistency between what we say, what we think, and what we do. And then ciclovia. This is something great for any municipality in Tennessee. What do? We open up the streets to the people on Sundays for a few hours, and we close them to cars. And then all of a sudden we get lots of people. When I came in as commissioner, there was a very small program with a few thousand people, and we opened it up to more than 70 miles. And it's great because in a time of economic crisis, you don't need to do arenas or gymnasiums. You have the streets. Just close them on Sundays to the cars and open it to people and have people walking and cycling and running and all kinds of things. And we did a whole network across the city. Look, more than 70 miles interconnecting all of the major parks of the city. And then we started getting, but not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate. So along the road, we did aerobics and we Tai Chi and all kinds of different activities, skateboarding and wall climbing. And so it's something that is really, really exciting, and we get everybody. It's almost like an exercise in social integration, because we get the young and the old and the rich and the poor and the fat and the skinny. Everybody. Actually, we get over 1 million people every Sunday of the year. Every Sunday. Actually, the World Health Organization has been so impressed that in 2010, the World Health Day was about open streets. And actually, they hired us, 80 cities, to help them. 1,000 cities, 1,000 lives. Actually, we did 1,300 cities. And other cities where we have been providing advice. Los Angeles, last year. LA, the city of the cars, and they're doing ciclavia, which is great. And many others. This is Mexico City, and this is Guadalajara. The young and the old people say, the young people, they don't want to go with their parents. No, in this, everybody comes out, people of all ages. Portland, they interconnected all of the parks, and even they teach these seniors how to ride tricycles, and Madison, and San Francisco in the weekday, in the weekend. Winnipeg, they got a winter ciclovia, which is quite nice. Brownsville. In the last 6 months, I've been working in Brownsville and Edinburgh and McAllen, which is in Texas, in the border with Mexico. They have the highest obesity rate of the country with the highest obesity rate in the world. Lack of physical activity, many, many issues. For example, we did a map of Edinburgh where there were parks. There are many park deserts where there are no parks. So we said, okay, let's analyze. I said, Mayor, let's do a study. What are the public facilities? The libraries, the city hall, the schools. And I said, wonderful, you got 34 schools. How many of those 34 elementaries are open after 3 o'clock? None. All of them have sports fields, but they don't open. They have a fence around, and they open at 8 in the morning, and they close at 3:30. And at the same time, it's a very poor area. The household income is $31,000. On top of it, the highest obesity rate in the country. No parks, and you got the schools closed. So one of the key ideas is how to create school parks. All of a sudden and it's not just for them. New York, I was talking with the Commissioner of Parks in New York. In the last 6 years, where they started a program of school parks, New York had 1,050 playgrounds. And they went from 1,050 playgrounds to 1,400 playgrounds. They have opened up 340 school parks without buying 1 inch of land. They have the land. All they have done is open up the schools after 3 p.m. on Saturdays, on Sundays, on holidays. And it's a win-win, because also the Board of Education, they get funding to improve the facilities of the park and so on. But anyway, I was there in Brownsville in August, and this is the mayor, Tony Martinez, and his wife, and he had a dinner with all his senior staff, and we started talking about ciclovia. And then he loved the idea, and the next 2 days that I was doing workshops and talks, he sneaked into the talks and said, he told the cities, oh, we're going to do a ciclovia in Brownsville. This was in August. And then all of a sudden, the mayor had a trip to Latin America for economic development. I said, oh, if you're going to go, you got to stop either in Guadalajara or in Bogota on a Sunday. And then actually he did, and he stopped. He created a team with the university and with public health. She is a counselor, and she's also a medical doctor, and the people from Bike, Texas, and so on. And then the mayor and the director of economic development, they stopped in Bogota for a Sunday, and I organized for them a tour, and they were 8 hours on a bike and learning about it. That's September. In October, he goes back to Brownsville, and he decides that he's going to do it, and he has the posters. And since a lot of the population is Hispanic, then he also did a Spanish version of the poster. And in November, he had the first one. So, in 100 days. So when people are doing, 20, 30, 40-year plans, this is 100 days. From the first time Tony Martinez, mayor of Brownsville, heard about the ciclovia, till he actually did the first one. And now he's thinking this year of doing one every month, and in the next year, in 2014, to do it every Sunday. So we really got to get people moving from talking to doing. And this is something really, really fantastic what they did in Brownsville. But let me tell you a little bit more now that I talk about Brownsville and a lot of this international activity and not Bogota. I want to tell you a little bit of the things we do with 880 cities. I want to tell you things that are applicable to any community, any neighborhood in Nashville. For example, one of the nice things is that I enjoy about my work is that I've been working in about 130 different cities in the last 5 years. For example, here, this is in Guelph, in Canada. And we organize, it's good to listen to the children. We went to an elementary school, and we got about 30 kids. And when the kids came in, we wanted to evaluate a park. So instead of just asking the kids about the park, we went in, and then, at the beginning, the Pledge of the Allegiance and so on. Then, for 30 minutes, we gave them a lesson on how to take photos, so that they would take photos, don't put the object right in the middle and so on. A few tips on photos. And then each kid had a camera, or we provided a camera for them, a digital camera. So we split the 30 kids in groups of 5, and then each group had a coordinator. And then off we went, and it's not a nice place, lots of roads and crossings and difficult. But we went to the park, and these kids were so excited, and it was fantastic. And then they started taking up photos of the things that they liked, the things that they didn't like. And they got together, and for example, we gave them this someone was teaching them how to focus and how to get the right picture, and it was so fantastic. And then they went back into the classroom, and they got in these groups of 5, and there was a computer, so each group would do a presentation of the things they liked, the things that they didn't like, and in the computer they would download images of things that they didn't see in the park, but they would like to see in the park. And regardless of what happens with the park, it will transform the life of each child after those 8 hours of immersion on thinking about parks. And hopefully many of them will also love photography, so that from then on, they will start going and taking photos of everything they like or they dislike. Actually, about 5 years ago, they invited me to working with social housing in Mexico. And some friends said, oh, don't go there because this is what social housing looks like in Mexico. Or these shoe boxes. And I said, look, the company that invited me does 50,000 units per year. So whether I go or not, they're going to do those 50,000. What if I'm able to plant a seed? So I started going. And actually, the other day I was doing a talk to some mayors in Mexico. And I said, first, before I tell you about social housing, I want to tell you how the people live, the wealthy people in Mexico. These houses all are worth more than $1 million each. Look at this. Looks like a ghost town. This is at 5 o'clock on a weekday. Remember the kid that I said, a kid walking to get an ice cream? Here in this kind of neighborhood, they don't even find a place to buy an ice cream. All of these walls, people live, like prisoners. So it's horrible. And then going out, I saw these buildings, so high buildings, that people have more in common with the birds and the planes than with people. No wonder they need another revolution. But let me tell you some of the things that we have been doing in the last 4 years with this company. Maybe they like because I spoke to the board of directors, and then they kept inviting me, and then they hired me to promote more ideas. But I want to show you some of the things that they're doing. For example, retail. Now, all of the neighbors have these houses like this that people live on the second floor, and they have retail on the first. These are very low income, between $20,000 and $40,000 homes. And they are funded through 30 years and so on. But look at this. We have free Wi-Fi in all of the public places, all of the parks, free Wi-Fi. So how did you get, by the way, these houses are only about 300 square feet. So I was telling the developers, when you live in a condo that is 300 square feet, you don't really live there. You sleep there. But you live outside. I said, for the last 20 years, you have been placing all of your emphasis on these 300 square feet. What else can you improve after 20 years? But instead, you go out and you got these horrible sidewalks that are only like 1 yard, and you got these crosswalks, you don't have parks and so on. I said, focus on the outside. And it's not only in the poor. Mayor Bloomberg in New York now created a contest, the best designers in North America to design 300 square foot condos in New York, because he said many people don't have the money to buy a 1,000 square foot, but they would like to live in New York. And basically it's because people live in the parks, in the sidewalks, in the bars, and so on. So, free Wi-Fi everywhere, and people take care of the parks, and we lower the speeds, and so on. And 4 years ago, they had not built one bikeway. Nothing, not 1 centimeter. And then we started talking about how the bicycles could be so great for people. And actually now they have built 100 miles of protected byways. One developer. And then one day I said, why don't you give out bicycles to the people that buy a house as a bonus? And he said, let me think about it. 20 minutes later, he gave the order to the CEO to start giving out bikes, and now they have given away 102,000 bicycles. And it's not out of charity. It's because they want to position themselves as an environmentally friendly developer. And they continue doing now parks, and they do all of these chairs. This was the first generation bikeway. And then this was the second, protecting the pedestrian and the cyclists and the cars and so on. And they continue. This is now third generation, which is quite nice, 4 years ago, all of the houses were 1 floor. Now they got like 90%, almost 90% in the southern region are 2, 3, and 4-story houses. And why is it important to have vertical? Because when you got vertical, it's better for the business. Also, they get more green spaces when it's vertical. And look at this. This is something really nice. I was thinking of my daughter coming back from the university. 10 o'clock at night, it's dark and it's rainy. Here, it's totally safe. Look at, this is what Jane Jacobs used to call ice on the street. This is what ice on the streets. All of a sudden, you build these promenades through the middle of the neighborhoods. A child is playing around and falls down and has a scratch on the knee. Everybody comes out to help. Everybody, all the neighborhoods are helping everybody. And it's something totally different. So it's not about the money. For example, look at this, all of these swimming pools that are building, public swimming pools. In Toronto, the average house is about $500,000. These houses are $20,000. And in Toronto, we're closing down public pools because we don't have money for maintenance. And these people got all of these public pools, and they paid with their condo fees, which are nothing almost. So, but let's switch continent. In South Korea, I'm working with Mayor Yom on something. He invited me because he is very environmentally friendly. He wants to show the community how does it look a community that with sustainable mobility. So this year, in September, we're going to host 4 weeks without cars. We chose 3 neighborhoods, and we have been going with ICLEI and the UN Habitat, and we're doing workshops with the community, improving the facilities, all that they will need in order for those 3 neighborhoods to function for a month without any cars, only walking, cycling, and public transit. So it's been quite nice. So the Comobility Festival is going to be in September. And then in order to get to Suwon, I got to stop in Seoul, something that is nice, the Changi Stream. Look at this. It used to be a river going around to the middle of Seoul. And what did they do? They built 5 lanes, a road of 5 lanes on top of it. What happens when you build 5 lanes? It gets full of cars. So then what do? You do a second floor. What happens with the second floor? It also gets full. So the cars wanted a 3rd floor. And you know what the mayor did about 8 years ago? Instead of building the 3rd floor, look, this is right through the middle. It's like 8 miles through the middle of downtown. Can you imagine this going through the middle of downtown of Nashville? Well, he tore it down. He said, I'm going to bring back the river, and I'm going to create a linear park. He realizes that if he builds a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, it's not going to work. So he's putting public transit. This was in 2005. And he opened up this. And it's something really, really great. Of course, it wasn't easy. Some of the businesses around said, oh, please don't bring it down. People are not going to stop for coffee. As if going at 60 miles an hour, people were going to stop for coffee. But now they are so proud that when President Obama and the others go to Seoul, South Korea, where do they take him? To this linear park. and the business is thriving, and people are doing very well. And by the way, who did it? This guy. When he was 36, he became CEO of Hyundai, which is the largest developer in South Korea. And as CEO of Hyundai, he built the second floor. And in 2002, he was elected mayor of Seoul. As mayor of Seoul, he took it down. It's gutsy. Tell your politicians to be gutsy, because sometimes it pays off. Now he's the president of South Korea. Till a few weeks ago that they elected a new government. So it's really nice. So, and then we went to Red Deer, because it's not only big cities. In Red Deer, we are working with the city council on creating it more walkable, but let me speed up, otherwise they're going to tell me I'm running out of time. Hanoi. You know, Hanoi is really nice, beautiful parks, lots of activity in the parks. Unfortunately, they're replacing the bicycles for motorcycles, and then it's really, really polluted, and the noise and so on. And one of the things working with them is how to open up the sidewalks for people. Because right now, you know, they are all invaded. So, you know, a civilized city is not the one that has many highways, but rather is the one where a child can go on a tricycle anywhere. So Minneapolis has all of this fantastic trail system all over. They plow all of it throughout the winter and interconnect, but it's not drive-to facilities. And when they don't have connectivity, is so important when you build bicycle networks that even there were private houses up to the Mississippi River. So they're building all of this, like half a mile on top of the Mississippi River. Even in Dallas, look at this. Really nice example. This was New York. You know, the Highland Park. But I think I'm going to mention that when I mention New York in a minute. Australia. When you go to Australia, one of the things is that you're going to think maybe when you are biking, you're going to bike into Russell Crowe. Or the men might think they're going to bike into Elle Macpherson. But I got news for you. You're not going to bike into them. Even though she represents everything that is healthy about cycling. When I go there, I haven't biked into them. I bike into these guys. But also you learn from everybody. From this guy, I learned that he's a mammal. And I said, hey, what's a mammal? And they said, oh, they are the middle-aged men in Lycra. Which is just a myth, because the reality is that people that bike, they bike in regular clothes and so on. But, you know, this is... And actually, one of the things I like about Australia, many cities are changing a lot. You know, in Sydney, what do they do in Sydney? The men, what do they carry when they go biking? The surfboard. What do the women carry when they go cycling? They bring their husbands. And actually in Sydney, look what Clover Moore, the mayor of Sydney, is doing. She's doing protected bikeways. They used to have painted lines and people were not using it. The only thing that really works is to create a physical barrier. Why do they have this? So that when it rains, there is a water drainage and it comes here and so on. Why are they doing it? It's not because they're promoting walking or cycling. No, it's because they want to reduce emissions, congestion, and improve public health. It's a much bigger issue than that. And also because they're competing with cities. Like Sydney is competing with Melbourne. So, what if Melbourne misses him? And actually, let me tell you about Melbourne. Because Melbourne used to be a horrible city. Now, in all of the city rankings, Melbourne is in the top 5 around the world in everything. 25 years ago, they used to call it Donut City. It was empty in the middle. People used to drive in and out. They go to work. No one would live there. It was horrible. But look some of the things they have done. For example, public art, which is one thing that Gary took me yesterday, and we saw part of some of the things you are doing. You're going to do much more of that. It's great. Continue doing it. Planting trees. Planting trees is so important. For example, look at the street in 1992 without any trees. And the same street in 2005 with trees. It's totally different. It's better for the health, better for the environment, better for business, better for walking, for cycling, and so on. So the planting of the trees is, you know, these laneways, they used to be so horrible, terrible, you know. They were dark and dangerous. The only use was for people to do things they should have done inside the bars before they come out at 3 a.m. And now they have been transformed into this. Wonderful place, not one or two, but hundreds of lanes that have improved through the art and through business and to creating really fantastic places. This is Rob Adams, the person that has led this over the last 20 years, changing a laneway from this into this. But of course, the government has to help. And the government gives money to the businesses that were going in at the beginning. Not anymore, but at the beginning. They said, okay, you know, if you're going to set up a flower shop, it might be easier on an established place. So do it here, and we give you $50,000 as seed money. And then they started working. Coffee places, and how to measure it. One of the things to measure is how are the public places used. For example, in 1983, there were only 2 coffee shops that had chairs and tables outside. All of a sudden, look at what happened in 93. Today, there are more than 600. And it's not because they're crazy about coffee, it's because they're crazy about people. They really enjoy it. The people living downtown, same thing. Each that is 5 households. So, and doing things like this. For example, this is you say, oh, what a nice flower place. Yeah, and then I asked Rob, how much do you charge? A lot of money for this? He said, no, it's not about the money. It's not about it's about creating a grade. So instead of charging a lot of rent, we say, okay, we are not going to charge you a lot of rent, but you got to keep clean the place around here. Also, the time, you got to open at 7 a.m. and close at 9 p.m., Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, got to open 24 hours. Why? Because then you come here, this is at noon, this is about 7 p.m., and this is at midnight. And then he says it's a lot cheaper than having police, and people feel safe when they're walking at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and you got all of these stations with lots of lights, with a person inside, with an alarm and a telephone and so on. So for the city, it becomes a win-win to have these places. So that's why Melbourne is so nice. From the air, it looks like any other city, but when you go down to the street level, it's really, so if these cities are doing it, of course you can do it, and you can do it even better. And you might say, well, Gil, why are you talking so much about walking or cycling or public places or parks or transit? Because of the benefits. And let's focus on the benefits. Because sometimes we say, oh, we got to do these bike facilities because of the cyclists. And people say, well, here in Nashville, you got 1% cyclists. Why are we going to take space away? No. So you don't talk about cycling. If you want to promote cycling, talk about the benefits. It's like if you're going to promote, people flying to the Caribbean, and you are American Airlines. So you don't want to show in your commercials people, all crammed up in the planes and the bags getting lost. No, you show images on the beach, people having a margarita and the bikinis and so on. Same thing with the benefits. We are going to get cleaner air. Walking, cycling, and transit has fewer gas emissions than any other mode. Look at the motorcycles that I was talking about. Hanoi is the worst polluter. It's going to be nice recreation for all, regardless of the age. It's going to improve mobility. People are going to tell you, oh, in Nashville, everybody drives. No, not everybody. Even in the wealthiest neighborhood of Nashville, at least 30% of the people don't drive. Everyone under 17, they don't drive. And about 30% of the over 60, even if they have money, also they don't drive. So this should be like a human right. It's going to improve transit, because transit is not going to pick us up in front of our houses. So how do people get transit in Christchurch or in Japan, in Chiba or whatever? It's going to make us healthier. Is this what the future looks like? We really got to work on that, And the issue is that there's so many health problems, mental, physical, related to obesity. That's why we got to work around it. Why are we talking about this when we're talking about walking or cycling? Because the cities where walking or cycling is a normal part of everyday life, the rates of obesity are very low. So, and here's including public transit. Same thing. So there is a very clear correlation. And even taking public transit, this is from Australia, from Melbourne, from Victoria, the state of where Melbourne is. People that take public transit, on average, they do 41 minutes of physical activity a day. Remember I said the World Health says now you got to do 30 minutes a day? They're already doing 41. So when they get home, they have time for themselves or the spouse or the children, or they can go running or cycling or whatever, but out of enjoyment, not because they got to do their 30 minutes. They already did their 30 minutes. So it's in and the relationship, look at the correlation of diabetes and obesity and so on. So things are getting so worse. I mean, there is all the data, and you know much more than me. And when people say, oh, it's always been like this, no, it's very clear it's not been like this. And things have been, these are the maps on how it's been increasing. It's getting worse year after year. Some of the states are leveling off. Tennessee is one of them, but it's not really decreasing significantly. But it could. And part of it is because it's a balance. We got to work on both. And we saw in the presentation, the mayor was talking and Gary was saying about the fruits and so on. Yeah, we got to work on the intake and the outtake of calories. So if we're people that are active for half an hour a day, look at all of the benefits. No wonder the head of the CDC says physical activity is the wonder drug for everything, mental health, physical health, emotional health. And also it's going to improve the personal income. People say about the low-income people in Tennessee, if you really want to do something about the low-income people, let's provide people the possibility to downsize from 2 cars to 1 per household. Look, the household income in Tennessee is less than $50,000. The median is like $46,000, but let's assume that it's $50,000. $20,000 goes into taxes, food, and shelter. So after taxes, food, and shelter, there's $30,000 left. Of the $30,000 per household, of those $30,000, they're for clothing and education and extended health and mobility. And the houses that have 2 cars, according to the American Automobile Association, if the car is 4 years old, it's going to be $15,000, $7,500 each, when you consider depreciation and insurance and gas and so on. So if people could downsize from 2 cars to 1, it was as if people had won the lottery. All of a sudden, they got 50% more money. Instead of having $15,000, they're going to have $22,500. Could be amazing. It's like a lottery, but instead of having the 1 in 10 million chances, it's 1 in 1. It's a personal decision. But in order for people to downsize, they got to be able to walk or bike or take public transit. You know, and there's many studies that have shown this. This is another study that shows that people living in suburban in the U.S., on average, they spend 25% of their income in transportation. In walkable urban, 9%. It's huge what having possibilities of mobility in any other way could represent from improving the income. It's also good for economic development and brings vibrancy, and it's good for happy people. And actually, it's so good for so many things that actually all around the world we should be giving an awards. We should give gifts to people that walk or bike or take transit. I recommend 2 gifts. 1 or 3 gifts. 1 is a park within walking distance of every home. Everyone in Nashville, everyone should be having a park within walking distance. Number 2, we got to lower the speeds. By the way, if we want people to walk or bike, by the way, many people, a lot of cities do a lot of things about the cyclists, improving cycling. There are some things that are nice to have and some that are must have. The nice to have, they make it nicer for that 1% that is already cycling, but that doesn't get new cyclists. What are the things that are nice to have? Maps, signage, bicycle racks on the buses, public bicycles, painting lines on the pavement, teaching people how to ride a bike. All of that is nice to have. And if I bike, but will it get new people? I mean, just start thinking for a minute. Anyone that you know that would like to ride on the streets but doesn't ride on the streets because they are afraid of biking on the streets, would they start biking because you now do a beautiful map every year? Would they start biking because you have signage or you have public bikes or you have bicycle racks on the buses? No. There are only 2 things that will increase the people. So if you want to have a lot of people riding bicycles in Nashville, there are 2 things. First, you got to lower the speeds. Every single street where people live, the speed limit should be 20 miles or less. 20 miles or less. And that is going to make it nice not only for cyclists, for pedestrians. When we ask people, you know, would you like the street in front of your house to be 20 miles or less? 90% of the people said yes. But then you say, would you like everyone's streets to be? They say, oh, no, not everyone, only mine. But you know, the reality is that there is no reason why it shouldn't be, for many, many reasons. First, if you get hit by a car at 20 miles, there is only 5% probability that you get killed. 5%. If you get hit at 40 miles, there is 85% probability. It goes in only 20 miles, from 20 to 40, it goes from 5% to 85%. And there are so many studies that show this, studies done everywhere. And actually, the other day I was doing some work in St. Louis, and I went jogging, and I went into a private street. And I said, oh, this is a private street. You know, the neighbors, they put whatever speed they want. What do? They put 20 miles. Why? Because it works. Why do we put 20 miles in front of the schools? Because it works. But do we want children to be safe only in front of the schools? Or do we want them to be safe everywhere? So it's very, very critical that we should lower. Actually, the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, who's doing the most interesting things about pedestrians and cyclists this year and for the next 4, he wants to reduce traffic deaths to go to 0. He wants to reduce all of them in 10 years. One of the things he's doing is lowering the speed in the neighborhoods to 20 miles an hour. And then the second issue, if you want to get people cycling, you got to create a network of protected bikeways. Bikeways that are physically separated from the cars. It has to be a network. You know, the painted lines, they don't work. Not only in Nashville, they don't work anywhere in the world. You don't see any city with 10% people cycling that has painted lines. None. Because the cars, they don't respect a painted line. They just run over the painted line and they park and they do all. This is Christchurch, New Zealand. You know, this is New York. This is Toronto near my office. You know, this cyclist was almost killed. Where was the car driver buying a hot dog? And when you have an SUV and the only thing you have between is a painted line, you go on the sidewalk. And then the pedestrians get injured. So you need to have some kind of physical separation. So that is safe for the pedestrians and for the cyclists and for the cars. And you got to think worst case scenario. It's night and it's raining and it's dark and so on. And then it's, so you got to create some kind of the physical separation. This is the kind that they are doing in Mexico City. So it's very, very important. In Montreal, when my daughter started going to McGill University, this used to be a painted line. And mostly men used to ride. All of a sudden, they started doing physically separated bikeways. And then you started seeing people of all ages and all levels of ability. This is Paris. Look some of the things they're doing in Paris, great sidewalks and nice. And some people might say, oh, Gil, you're dreaming. Yeah, but you know, we got to dream. And this is not a dream. You know, we got to dream big and think big. And then together we can make all of this a reality. Let me tell you. And when you say 8 to 80 cities, what is 8 to 80 cities? This is not just about parks or biking or walking, whatever. Those are the means. The end is, how can we contribute to create vibrant cities and healthy communities where people are going to live happier, enjoying public places? So that is the idea. And when we're talking, always people say, is this intersection safe, Gil? You know, is this crosswalk safe? Can my children walk to school? I said, look, you don't have to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple rules, steps. Step number 1, think about a child that you love. Your son or daughter or grandchild. Once you have that burger in your mind, go to step number 2. Think of an older adult that you are care for. And when you have the child and the older adult, go to step number 3. Would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking or cycling to get eggs or milk or to go to school? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not. And then we got to do it better. The reality is, what if everything that we did in Nashville, the streets and the parks and the parks, especially all related to mobility, had to be great for the 8 and the 80-year-olds? You know, we probably would end up with great places for all. We got to stop building cities thinking that everybody's 30-year-old and athletic. And we got to build cities for all. That is the key message of what we want to do with 8 to 80. And we also work around sustainable happiness and equality. And happiness is that contributes to the individual, the community, and the global well-being, but does not exploit other people, the environment, or future generations. And in equality, we're talking about sustainable mobility and parks. But this sustainable mobility, we already saw. So how do we want to live? That is the key question, because there is change ahead. Let me tell you a couple of things about Copenhagen. And I know I love Copenhagen, and I'm a senior consultant with Gale Architects, so I go there quite often. Here we were having lunch, 23 people in the space of 1 car. And you're going to tell me, Gale, don't talk about Copenhagen. In Nashville, we are different. In Nashville, we got nothing in common with New York or Copenhagen or Bogota. We are unique. I know. In Nashville, always remember that you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. Is unique. Even within Nashville, each street is different, each neighborhood is different, each area is different. So this is not like on a computer that we copy and paste, but rather is how to adapt and improve. We can get an idea from one place. Actually, when I did the Ciclovia in Bogota, I was thinking of Central Park in New York. I was reading a book of Frederick Olmsted, who did most of the nice parks, big parks in the North America. That was 150 years ago. And he said, you know, in New York, in the 1850s, everybody hated everybody. The locals and the immigrants, the blacks and the white, the rich and the poor. And he said, you know, they don't know each other. They don't live in the same building. The kids don't go to the same schools. They don't go to the same doctors. We need places where we can meet each other as equals. So I said, that's what the Ciclovia could be. And that's what Central Park was in New York. And I know we're doing things, but in many cases, we're doing things at the speed of the turtle. And then we become kind of like another turtle, say, I might be slow, but I'm ahead of you. Of course, and I'm not talking specifically of Nashville, but most of the cities, you know, of course, most of the cities, they can always find 100 cities that are worst. But if we're benchmarking ourselves with cities that are worst, eventually we're going to look like those. if we benchmark ourselves with cities that are better, eventually we're going to look like those. So change is hard. Change is hard. In Copenhagen, they were going through an oil crisis in the 70s, and they said, we're not going to depend on oil again. We're going to change. And then, for example, they started creating, change is hard. They were going to create the first pedestrian street, and people said, what? You're going to get the cars out so that people walk? Here we got too many cars. How are we going to go to pedestrian streets? And the number 2 barrier, they said, the weather is horrible. It's cold in the winter. It's hot in the summer. It rains all year. But the number 1 barrier, they said, pedestrian, that's not part of our culture. Pedestrian, that's for the Italians. Because the Italians are loud and noisy. And they like to be on the streets. But we are Danish, and we are shy, and we don't go out. Now the Danish are more Italian than the Italians. They love their pedestrian streets in the rain, in the sun, in the winter, in the summer. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. They went from car invasion to people places, and they have been transforming the city. And it's really, really wonderful what they have been doing. And it's really incredible. Look at this, how cycling has been increasing and so on. Actually, cycling has doubled since the 1990s. But this is what we need in Nashville. Boys and girls and women and older adults. And now they got other problems. They got traffic jams, but what are nice problems to solve. 38% of the trips, here is less than 2%, about 1. And here's 38 out of 100 are on a bike. That's how they go to the theater. That's how they go to movies, to their friends, and so on. Even in the middle of the snow, they continue doing it, Even that girl. So, and it's about changing public places and improving all of these areas and making it great. So, why do they bike? Is it for environmental reasons? No. Mostly, 1% is for environmental reasons. Basically, they bike is because it's easy, it's fast, and it's convenient. And this is a point that maybe we gotta keep in mind. Cycling is not a joke. Copenhagen has a high per capita income. The economy is doing well. Cycling is also not a frivolity. Cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people around the world. It's the only individual mode of mobility for all children and youth around the world. Cycling should be a right, unless we believe that only those who have the age and the money to have a car have a right to individual mobility. That's why we talk about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability and so on. And what makes Copenhagen easy, fast, and convenient? Because they think of the women and the babies and the children, even the woman that is talking to her boyfriend, I'm late. Or the guy with the guitar, and the immigrants that don't come from cultures that are very cyclists, the older adult on the trikes, always unidirectional, always on the right side of the street. Physically separated. Any street that has more than 40 kilometers, which is 25 miles an hour, has to be physically separated. And this is, of course, if you're going through the middle of the park, you can have bidirectional. But if you're on the streets, it's always unidirectional. And the weather, if it's going to rain, either you carry your umbrella. Everybody bikes. Biking is not something they do just the men 40 to 50 in spandex. Everybody does it. So look at this. At midnight, these counters go to 0. This photo was at 2 a.m., and already 700 people had gone by in the middle of a snowstorm. In the afternoon, 3,800, and at night, they already had over 7,000 people having gone through this counter. And it was at -4 degrees. So it's, and if you have bad weather, they say there's no such thing as bad weather, It's bad clothing, and they go on. It rains, that's not an issue where people are not going to bike. So these are some of the things. Oh, the network. The network is very, very important. And again, inside the neighborhoods, lower the speed below 20 miles. But on all the arterials, bikeways, a network, so that you can go from anywhere to anywhere. And now, something that is nice. Remember that I said, when you are good, it's very hard to go from good to great. Now, all over Copenhagen, you got this. They want to go from 38 out of 100 to 50 out of 100. So this is something that is interesting. That, and now they're rebuilding, and they're doing all kinds of crosswalks and improving the width of some of them that are congested and so on. So I'm going to end the talk with this. There are 5 elements to create change: the sense of urgency, the political will, the leadership, the doers, and public engagement. But before this, I'm going to show you a short video so that you can rest from my voice, and to get some ideas of what could happen here in Nashville.
Here in Copenhagen, we had a great influx of cars starting in the middle of the 50s. We call it the car invasion. And by the early 60s, it started to be really bad. And in 1962, it was decided to take the cars out of the main street of Copenhagen. It's a 1 kilometer long street. There was great debate, discussion, it will never work, all these businesses will go broke and the weather is not good enough for being outdoors in Denmark, but it was closed anyway. That was the start of a long trek where in small installments, improvements have been made to the pedestrian landscape, to the public spaces.
We actually have 18 squares now that used to be parking lots. And when they started shutting them down and when they made the main pedestrian street here, people were saying, no, this is not Italy. People do not use the public space. What are you thinking? They don't go walking like just to take a stroll. And look what happened.
I think one of the wonderful things of pedestrian places is that they always surprise you. You don't know what's going to happen. Can we even imagine for a second what these pedestrian streets would be like if there were cars on it? For example, these kids here with the hat, that's the symbol of graduation. They just finished their high school, they are graduating today, they are going crazy, they are going into the fountains, and we see people also sitting on the floor. I mean, it's so nice and so well taken care of that people can sit on the floors.
People want to be with people, and that means we go where people are, where there are space for walking, for expressing yourself. For instance, yesterday I went down by the water and in front of the Royal Theatre there's this sport walk and there was outdoor tango all night.
I mean, they're meeting each other, they're having a coffee, they're just chatting, they're riding their bikes, they're walking their dogs, they're hanging out with their kids. Like, it's just amazing, they're just living. It's like the perfect example of public space and how to do it right.
So we've seen this gradual transition of the city of Copenhagen from a traffic-infested city to really a people-oriented city, which is quite lovely.
The philosophy is that if you can keep speed down, say 30k or 40k, you will not have so many accidents, and if you have accidents, they will not be very severe. So that's the basic idea, that if you want to transform our urban environment into something for human beings, I mean, you have to reduce the speed as one of the first things. I have very few examples with 15k actually.
We have a number of streets which we call pedestrian priority streets, where pedestrians have the right of way, but you can have bicycles, you can have cars.
One of the reasons why it's such a wonderful walkable place, Copenhagen, is because they have lowered the speed in all of the neighborhoods. I think that in North America, we need to create fantastic pedestrian facilities and cycling facilities along the arterials. But in the neighborhoods, we have to lower the speed below 20 miles an hour. And not only just by putting up signs, but putting up physical barriers.
One of the best ways of keeping speed down is actually to use our humps. Because by the humps, you are very, very sure that the speed stays down. Because if you don't have this, you will have guys, usually guys, going much too fast in a low speed area because they can. We are standing in front of the old meat market in Copenhagen, and some years ago there was a lot of heavy traffic coming in the morning especially. So, but they closed down the meat market. We felt we've got to better change the street, and this is a very central part of Copenhagen, so there's a lot of people living here and a lot of enthusiasm about also using space for anything else than traffic.
This is a wonderful street, and can you imagine the difference of quality of life of all of these thousands of condos? And in the middle, they built this fantastic park.
What's left is actually only a very narrow, we call it share space solutions, where cars at very slow speed and also bicycles and pedestrians can move around each other without really any kind of regulation, as long as the speed is low.
there are some places where they got nice benches and restaurants on the side. You go to the next block and there is a small basketball court. And you go to the next one in a skateboard park. And then in some of the sides, you have fruits and vegetables that are being sold on the street. And then in another block, you have flowers.
In the meatpacking district here, we have a lot of new bars opening up. And there's, if you look, all the bikes that were standing around here, it sort of looks like this outside every bar. It's an amazing social network. You ride past cafes, and you see bikes parked next to the cafe. It makes the whole city accessible and very, very human.
You know, these environments are very attractive for urban living, and it really attracts people to be on the streets, and it raises the price for those apartments up here, because this is attraction. I mean, this is urban, trendy lifestyle that we have.
I'm going to have to skip a few parts because yesterday when I was going on the tour, I kept thinking of things to add, and I added too much, and then we're running out of time. But when you want to change, these 5 elements are very important. The sense of urgency. It's very important to create a shared sense of urgency because we seem to be facing a perfect storm. In so many ways, we got traffic congestion, and we got climate change, and we got the obesity crisis, and we got also economic crisis, and everything seems to be coming at the same time. On top of that, good things in the U.S., you know, there might be opportunities. One is there's population growth, and also we're living longer. I mean, in the U.S., we're going to get 100 million more people in the next 30 years. So not only do we have to improve the cities that we have today, we got to create great cities for 100 million people. Also, we're living longer. Think, after hundreds of thousands of years, the life expectancy, if we had been born in 1800, was just 39 years. So now we have more than double the life expectancy. So it's very clear that we have learned how to survive. But when we see all of this, it's also very clear that now we got to learn how to live. And that's what this summit is about. It's about learning how to live. So, because this has so much to do with the built environment. It's not just telling people, don't waste a liter of gas to get a liter of milk if the closest place to get a liter of milk is 3 miles away. We got to have parks within walking distance and so on. So all of this is really important. It's about how do we want to live. You know, when we define the cities around cars, all we get is more cars. And then we got to invite our friends to help us cross the street. And this isn't far from reality. The streets are getting wider and people are going faster. But when we build, so what do? We build more roads. Is this what we want Nashville to look like? Yeah. See, all over the world, you know, the reality is that when we build more roads, thinking that that's the solution, it's like if we try to put out fire using gasoline. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But when we define the cities around people, then we're going to get healthier and happier people, and we're going to get better quality of life. And quality of life is very important because we live in an ever more globalized world. And the best people, however you define best, can be the best community organizers or the best planners or the best medical doctors or the best musicians. They go wherever they have the best quality of life. If they can live anywhere, they're going to say, where do I have the best? Well, for me, for my spouse, for my kids. So this is very important. I mean, every day you got to wake up in Nashville saying, you know, how can we retain our best people? How can we attract the best people?
I know that part of the title of this gathering was about eating, and implied by that, I think, food. And there were some comments mentioned primarily by the mayor relating to that. I'd like to hear your thoughts just briefly about the following kind of idea as it relates to so-called infrastructure, maybe compared to what's traditionally been thought of as infrastructure that you primarily talked about. And that is the agricultural infrastructure and the agricultural land that still exists. And my opinion is that we need to revalue the rural environment that still surrounds our city and think of it, more importantly, not as its own independent self, but as in its relationship to the urban environment. As we grow increasingly aware of the need to decrease our dependence on food that's traveled from far distances and the health implications of that and the economic implications of that, I think it's going to become increasingly important to make sure that we don't think of that. Agriculture is a man-made thing. It is infrastructure in essence, I think. And even though it occurs in a naturally occurring environment, perhaps more closely associated in our minds than some of the other components, I think we need to start rethinking about that and consider that a part of our infrastructure and start focusing on equal ways that we support those farmers that are not just as customers, but even also as investors and supporters in new creative ways. And I'd like to hear a comment or two about that.
Okay. And the last question, and I'll answer that at the same time. Yes?
I was wondering, you mentioned a couple of the elements,
built into what you're doing, how to measure related to health outcomes at all? Have you been able to do that? Because that seems to be one of our issues.
Good. Both are very related. On that sense, you point a very important factor. We know that the area is going to grow by 1 million people. We should be thinking, where are those people going to live? It's very, very important. Let me give you an example. In Mexico, where I'm advising a few of the governments, they just finished a study. In the last 30 years, the 93 largest cities doubled the population. And doubling the population is not bad. Actually, it might be good if they had doubled the population in the same area, in the same footprint. Or worst case scenario, if they had doubled the population, doubling the land use. No, they doubled the population and they multiplied the land area, the footprint, by 7.5 times, almost 8 times. It's like if we have here 100 people sitting in this room, and now we got 200. And instead of having twice this room, now we got 8 times this room. So it's not only about agriculture, which is very important, but it's also how are we going to pay for the maintenance of the sewage going 8 times the size of the city? How are we going to pay for electricity, for the roads, for the maintenance? How are we going to set up the school systems? So that is something that is very, very important. We got to have that agriculture because also it's going to be closer to where we live, but also because that 1 million people, and when people think of density, they always think of these horrible 20, 30, 40, 50-story buildings. No, most of the cities with the highest density in the world are cities with 4, 5, and 6-story buildings that are next to each other. Instead of having a 40-story building and one every 100 yards, no, they had, wherever there's an arterial, where there's going to be public transit, they allow densities up to 5 stories. Usually it's like the width of the street. And then, so it looks very nice. It has a lot of contact with the street, but it's not expanding. So that is a critical element. Similar also to the food is very important cities that are walkable or bikeable because they buy local. When you are walking or you are cycling, how much can you carry? You can carry for 2 or 3 days, so you buy local. When you are driving, how much do you buy? You buy for 2 or 3 weeks, so you go to Walmart. So then those are that is a big difference. That's also really important on buying local. But it's critical. It cannot be that because you're going to have 1 million more people, you continue to expand and expand and expand because you're going to get rid of all the agricultural land, but also you're going to become, this is not going to be sustainable. And in regards to your question, it's very related because everything is linked to everything. So the quality of the air, it's not just about obesity, but it's also about developing physical activity. It's about mental health as well. It's about quality of the air. It's about the noise. And a lot of these things are measured. And we already know the benefits. We really got to work on those benefits because otherwise, Einstein used to say that, that we cannot solve the things doing the same things that how the problems were created. So we got to change how we do things. But it takes guts. And it takes the 5 elements that I mentioned. The sense of urgency is for now. It's not for 40 years from now. No, we got to start today and making bold changes. The second element was the political will, where I said, the general interest must prevail over the particular. The third was the doers, finding solutions to the problems. The fourth was the leadership, where each one of you got to be leader in your neighborhood, in your place of work, in the schools, in the universities, whatever. And 5, public engagement. The citizens cannot continue being spectators. The citizens have to play a role. They have to send letters to the elected officials. They have to send emails. They have to contact the local media. They have to call the radio stations. They have to go to public meetings. Hopefully to participate in politics, because through politics is how we develop policy and that's how we create the cities. So I think through those 5 elements, starting with the shared sense of urgency, I'm pretty sure that you can transform any city. So first Nashville, and then the rest of Tennessee, and then the US, and then the world. But there is so much that we can do, and in many ways it's an exciting time. But at the same time, we really got to move from talking to doing. So I thank you very much, and I wish you all the very best.
We'd like to make a presentation. Dr. Paul will be presenting some awards, the Nash Vitality Awards, and These recognize contributions of an individual or group or business or organization to policy, systems, and environmental changes that promote healthy community design infrastructure in Nashville in one of the following categories. These people have done tremendous work. We need to recognize them. They've either helped out with transportation, open space, food access, walkability within our city, neighborhood design and development, even healthy housing. So I would like to invite to come up, please. We have Mark Deutschman as well as Julia Landstreet. Sandy Bivens is not able to be here, so Jim Heston is going to accept the award on her behalf. I will then tell you a little bit about these folks once they've accepted the award. I'll give a little bit of background of each. Julia Landstreet, right here to my left, is the Executive Director of the Nashville Civic Design Center. Now, Julia's role at the center includes oversight of the administrative and development functions of the organization, as well as cultivating relationships within design, development, education, and civic communities. Now, she edits all publications and participates in the identification and development of future programs and projects. Julia sits as the Executive Board of Directors for Friends of Warner Parks. She serves on the steering committee for Nashville's General Plan and the Downtown Chambers Redevelopment Committee. So congratulations to her. And my apologies to Dr. Paul for putting you on the spot. I was going to wait until he handed these out and then mention who these folks are, but we'll just go along and do it this way. Mark, sitting next to Julia right here, is the founder and CEO of Village Real Estate Services, is actively involved in selling Nashville's urban neighborhoods. Mark is a strong proponent for realtor education to promote the integrity of sales and service in our community. He's committed to environmental stewardship and was instrumental in the creation of the Environmental Committee at GNAR, I believe that's how it's pronounced. Mark is also the president of Greenways for Nashville, the chairman of sustainability for the Urban Land Institute in Nashville, and serves on the Greenways Commission and the Energy Advisory Commission for Mayor Dean. Congratulations to him. We have Jim Hester with us. Jim, thanks for being here. However, I'm sorry to say we're going to talk about Sandy Bivens, who is the one who's being acknowledged. So Jim is just representing for Sandy today. Sandy Bivens is the superintendent of nature centers with the Nashville Metro Parks and Recreation Department. Now, she coordinates Nashville's system of nature centers, which now includes Warner Park Nature Center, Shelby Bottoms Nature Center, Bells Bend Outdoor Center, and Beeman Park Nature Center, as well as Fort Negley Visitor Center. Sandy started working as a naturalist 36 years ago with Metro Parks and was the director of the Warner Park Nature Center for 20 years. She has a BS in Recreation and Parks Administration from the University of Missouri and MS in Education from the University of Tennessee. Sandy could not be with us today because she is not feeling well, but congratulations to her. And Jim, thank you for accepting on her behalf. First of all, I'll start with you, Julie, and we'll just make our way down the line. If you can discuss any kind of observations on health and the built environment, and how it's changed over time, in your opinion. And the microphone is right next to you, Julie, if you don't mind grabbing that, please.
Gary touched on it some in his conversation, and I think Carl did a great job of pointing out different things that have been happening in Nashville. And just a real sort of microcosm is, as you look around and somebody talks about, traditional development or recent development, all of us what seems to come to mind is that sort of suburban tract house, car-oriented development. And Nashville really is much more diverse than that in terms of our housing stock. And so we've certainly turned a corner, and we're more conscious about filling in communities and making them more pedestrian-friendly and cycle-friendly and whatever. And we have a long way to go, particularly going back and readapting those other communities. Which one's forward? Okay. This was supposed to be 5 to 7 minutes. I can talk pretty fast. So the Civic Design Center was founded in the year 2000 under Bill Purcell's administration, and we received the Innovator Award. I've only been with the Design Center for about 2.5 years, so I really need to do a shout out to our staff and our past design directors and past staff members, design fellows, and interns. They are really the brains and the brawn in the organization. We're currently located in Butler's Run on 2nd Avenue. It's that blue awning towards the back. This is our website. We are much better at making things happen than we are at posting them immediately on the website, but everything that we have done eventually ends up here, particularly our past studies and speakers and speeches and stuff. I really recommend it. The first activity that the organization embraced wholeheartedly that was large scale was the Plan of Nashville. This was published in 2004. It involved about 2.5 years and input from close to 1,000 residents around the city using charrettes. It was met with a lot of media acclaim. Half the people thought we were brilliant, the other half thought we were really bonkers, and either we were going to reshape the city for the good or we were going to drive us bankrupt with some of the ideas. Luckily, things have worked out pretty dang well. This is a more current slide than the Plan of Nashville process, but it shows a typical charrette with maps and drawings and people and milling around and name tags and all sorts of other fabulosity. Embedded within the Plan of Nashville were the 10 principles. One was to embrace the Cumberland River and treat it with respect. It has reached, it is the one has received a lot of sort of large-scale traction. This is a view from where the Cumberland Park is now, looking to Nashville. The Civic Design Center is brought in on projects large and small. We're typically involved in a project really 5 to 7 years before it's shovel ready. This is the convention center. Small scale sites can be as small as neighborhood. This is a playground at Morrell School where we brought in a number of user groups. We look at the whole county and we spend a lot of time with Google Maps. We are definitely a partners-based organization. The University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design has been our longest standing academic partner and quite a significant academic partner. They, in fact, supply 2 of our staff members, and a lot of their design studio work. I showed this slide. This is on the kiosk upstairs that's part of the exhibition. It's very typical of our partner groups in terms of the diversity, and some give money, some give loving support. Everybody seems to have an opinion and a lot of sweat equity. But we would not exist. We're a 501c3, and we wouldn't exist without that diversity of partnerships. Recent projects include, this was the movie that they referenced with Gary. It was Design Your Neighborhood. It was a documentary done based on a month-long course with inner city youth. Anode partnered with us, and they did the packaging for the DVD, which was distributed to every high school in the state of Tennessee to work on curriculum development. And we received a call yesterday, in fact, from someone recommended by the NEA who is working with 5th grade. It's a city in South Carolina redoing an adaptive reuse of a downtown cotton mill, and they consulted with us on how to construct a charrette for 5th grade, which was a great opportunity. This is a recent project we did with TDOT and MPO. Took about 2.5 years and a lot of research. These are the chapters to the right, and they exist as individual chapters that you can download from our website. The project is typical in that it included research, visioning, dreaming, thinking, more visioning, looking around town, kind of just saying. Hopefully Jay will talk about that one in a little bit. This is a recent studio project between the Civic Design Center and the design director in UT, and that's revisioning 75 acres that's currently an interstate exchange. This is capping the interstate between going down West End to reconnect the neighborhoods, to see what that would look like. It also got everybody all churned up, which was pretty exciting, and it echoes the project that Gil referenced and is currently going on in Dallas, Texas. We had an international design competition revisioning the East Bank and to incorporate healthy and active living as a part of it and sustainable practices. We had great response worldwide from entries, over 139 entries, all continents. Again, we got great press, got everybody all churned up. The winning project, it was installed up at Rolling Mill Hill. If y'all haven't been up there since they've done the renovations, I would totally recommend it. It is a beautiful view of the city, and they've been injecting a variety of interesting uses. This is our current project, the Shaping Healthy Communities. The exhibit's upstairs. It is a very diverse and interesting topic, and Dr. Jackson appeared with Gary Gaston, our design director, in an episode of NPT last spring on health and built environment as it is in Nashville. Call me if y'all have more questions. Thanks so much for the award.
We'll go ahead and have Mark give his presentation, and then we'll continue on with the Q&A.
I have some pictures too, but I don't know how to cue it up. Okay. Thanks for having me. I think we need to speed up. Thank you, Guillermo. That was very impressive. Peter, Fabian, Kim Hawkins, Manuel Zeitlin. We all have to speed up, it sounds like, to make this community a more livable community. But we're on our way. Back in 1989, 1990, when I started my real estate practice, this is even before Village Real Estate Services, people would call and ask about lofts downtown, and I would say, I'm sorry, we don't have any lofts downtown. How about a nice bungalow in Hillsborough Village? And the truth is that we didn't allow downtown housing. We had a central business district that had about 50,000 people working downtown, but we didn't have housing downtown. So really the context was neighborhoods that were abandoned, beautiful architecture in some of our older neighborhoods, but unkempt and largely underutilized. We had some very nice neighborhood commercial districts, but they were not as vibrant as they might be. So our practice was from that standpoint. I personally got involved in a 1-mile radius. I was living near Hillsborough Village and got involved with Manuel and Bob Bernstein and coffee houses and neighborhood art and Kim Hawkins and some of the others to try to revitalize one neighborhood working with Vanderbilt University. And that 1 mile spread out to 12 South, where we talked to MDHA, and 12 South, I think some of you know that neighborhood at this time, was 70% vacant at that time. And MDHA agreed that if we bought a building, that they would start organizing the merchants, set up a plan, and begin to think about how we could make it a better community for our residents. And it's come a long way. The other thing was we didn't have any housing downtown, so I think zoning code was starting to shift. We started to get better planners and city leaders to think about how we could activate downtown. And when I started Village Real Estate in 1996 with myself and 2 other agents, we were dedicated to try to recreate some of the Midtown neighborhood residential districts, and we are waiting for housing to come downtown. And we set about with a multifamily residential strategy, thinking about how we could help developers think about creating communities in the downtown core. And then with my partners Aaron White and Hunter Connolly, we started Core Development Services to think about the adaptive use of some of the vacant and semi-vacant buildings in the core. As late as 2002, we had 84 vacant and semi-vacant buildings in our core, and so it was important for us to try to reutilize those with mixed-use spaces and to try to create some housing. And so we did buildings like the Crest Building, the Church Street Lofts, Exchange Lofts, Art Avenue Lofts, and some of the buildings downtown, and worked with a bigger project over in Germantown called the Lofts at Worthing Mills, and that was a 400,000 square foot vacant warehouse that had pigeons and just beautiful space, but not underutilized. So now we're doing more cottage communities. We're working in the urban sector, and I would say a trend in the housing community would be to try to fill the space and the gaps between the neighborhood residential that we have and the core, which has emerged. I think you'll see a lot of places like inside the Wedgwood Loop, the corridors on Nolensville, Charlotte. Some of those corridors will begin to activate and will fill in the core in Nashville and make a healthier neighborhood. One of the things that we started, and I started this with the Urban Land Institute in 2009, was something called Go Green. And I had gone to a seminar and I learned that if we're going to be sustainable in our community and in our world, really, we need to think about reducing the carbon footprint. And I happen to be one who believes that we are responsible for climate change. I think humans have a big impact on what's happening in the world. And in my work in real estate, I felt like the thing that I can help tackle is buildings. In our city, buildings are responsible for 40 to 45% of the carbon footprint. And so if we can start reducing the energy usage in our houses, one house at a time, we're going to make some kind of impact. So we started Go Green. We started Go Green District 18 with Christine Lalonde and Mayor Dean. We launched in 2009, and we've actually expanded out and challenged other council districts, including Peters District and 11 other council districts. We now have a Go Green Nashville. We work with the mayor's office with their Nashville Energy Works, and we've had energy evaluations on over 5,300 houses. And they've spent over $12 million retrofitting their houses, and have actually received over $1.5 million in energy incentives to help do that. I am also the president of Greenways for Nashville, and we don't create our bike lanes and greenways in 1 year or 100 days, but we've made a lot of progress over the last 20 years. We now have over 50 miles of paved greenways and 192 miles, I believe, of paved and primitive trails, and we've made a big dent with the Stone Rivers purchase recently and have created some beautiful connected spaces for our community. I think the goal of Greenways is to try to reach into all the neighborhoods and make them accessible to places in Antioch and Hermitage and Donaldson, and it's really important for health and vitality for people to be able to get out in the greenways. I think that's what I have today, and thank you very much for the award. I'm humbled and I'm impressed and inspired, and thank you for the speaking that we've had thus far.
All right, Jim's going to say a little
I'll
something
just
as well.
take just a minute.
Sure.
I'm here standing in for Sandy Bivens. I'm new to parks, but one of the things I've learned about parks is a lot of people think of the crown jewels. The Warner Park is the crown jewel, or Centennial's the crown jewel, or the Greenways are the crown jewel. But sincerely, I think the park staff, you know, the dedicated staff, there's one of our crown jewels, and Sandy Bivens is one of those people. She's been around for 35 years. She's led the whole Nature Center movement for us. She's helped with these buildings and guide the architecture and the design and the programming for all of these buildings. And we at Parks really appreciate this group recognizing one of our crown jewels, Sandy Bivens. And if she was here, I think she would say thank you, and she would say, get outside. Everybody go outside and enjoy nature.
All right. Now that you know who these folks are, if you have questions for them later, please go ahead and go up to them and ask them then. But I'll just pose a couple questions. We'll get through this part of the panel discussion. We'll be able to break for lunch. Julia had answered the first question of mine, which was basically just discussing observations of health and the built environment and how it's changed over time. So we'll move forward and just go to the next question, which is discussing obstacles to overcome in order to achieve Mayor Dean's goal of becoming the healthiest city in the Southeast. And I ask that of any one of you three, if you want to pick up your microphone and comment on that, just how we can move forward and become the healthiest city in the Southeast.
I do think continuation of greenways and connectivity into the neighborhoods is truly important. I think we heard a lot of good suggestions today from Guillermo in his speech, and I think we can look at other cities like Copenhagen for inspiration to help our city progress. But I think it's truly necessary to think about where we're going to be living in 100 years or in 10 years in our city. And we're still a city of sprawl, and we're moving away from the city faster than we're recreating the core. And I think we have to think that, you know, what do you do to create incentives for development downtown and development in the midtown sector versus continuing to move further away from the city and creating additional infrastructure and more reliance on the automobile?
All right. I'm going to follow up with another question. Just talk about, any one of you can discuss this, but talk about moving out of industry silos and really working with people in different healthy built environment component areas, and how have those partnerships developed?
Well, the Civic Design Center, you know, we wake up every day and think of partnerships and work on connecting people. But it's interesting as we have gone out and talked to different departments how potentially rare it is. I mean, Nashville, I think, is quite unique in the amount of dialogue that they're trying to generate between Public Works and Metro Water Services and building and planning and zoning. But unless we have that cooperation and dialogue across all of the departments and engagement, we really won't make the progress that we hope to.
The Go Green campaign is really a remarkable partnership because we have, first we have the Metro Council members who are involved in the various campaigns, and they have all their catchy slogans, and we're going neighborhood, neighborhood, community by community. But we've got involvement through Vanderbilt University, we have involvement in the mayor's office. We did a Go Green North Nashville with Tennessee State University and got a grant for $800,000 to retrofit 100 houses in that location at no cost to the residents. We're now working with Hands On Nashville and working with them to do some work in Chestnut Hill and trying to find volunteers to help the lower income folks retrofit their houses. We're doing work with the various community groups like 12 South Neighbors. So there are ways for us to do campaigns like this and get businesses, communities, municipality involved to do something good for the community.
For us, the two parts, the recreation, it's natural for parks, you know, to support active recreation, and we have an increasing emphasis on that and a mandate to try to get more people out into the parks. So I think part of it is just an acknowledgement from the leadership and also from people, the public, how important it is. And so we are pushing more and more to do more programs and to get people out in the parks more. And then as far as partnerships, it's the same thing. I mean, with decreasing budgets, we've got to come up with ways to keep doing what we're doing to sustain the same levels of service. And that the answer to that for us is partnerships. So we're constantly looking for partnerships and ways to do things differently.
Very good. We could spend another 30 minutes probably and even do Q&A with all of our guests in the audience, but we're going to wrap up this portion if you all don't mind. That's why I say if you have a specific question for one of these folks, just please find them at the lunch hour or even afterwards and go up to them personally. I want to commend you all on the work that you've done up until this point. Congratulations on your awards. And we're going to go ahead and break now for lunch. So as I mentioned, our next panelists have joined us now, and I'll go ahead and kind of give a little introduction about each one of them, and then we'll hear from them individually, and then I'll pose some questions toward them as well. First, I'll start off with Diana Stevens. She's to my immediate left. Diana Stevens is the Assistant Director of Building Operations and Support Services for the Department of General Services with Metro Government. Now, Diana is responsible for managing the Building Operations Support Services Division of the Department of General Services. Since 2004, this division has been focused on the assessment, the development, and implementation of an integrated facilities management services program. Now, the General Services portfolio consists of 88 facilities, totaling 4 million square feet, including facilities requiring highly technical requirements and mission-critical functions. Now, in 2008, this program was expanded to include the design and construction management responsibilities for Metro Government. A responsibility of this program includes the design and construction of LEED certified facilities. So we will hear from Diana here shortly. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next panelist, and that is Kim Hartley Hawkins. Kim is founding principal of Hawkins Partners Incorporated, HPI, is a landscape architecture and planning firm based in the downtown area here in Nashville. Kim is a landscape architect with more than 3 decades of experience in planning, design, and construction. Now, Kim's commitment is to connect people to community through thoughtful, informed design, and she holds a degree in landscape architecture from Louisiana State University. Kim has been an active part of the community throughout her career. Notably, Kim was the founding president of the Nashville Civic Design Center in 2000 and serves on numerous boards and commissions, including the University of Tennessee College of Architecture Board of Advisors, the Conservation Commission for the state of Tennessee, Mayor Dean's Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and several arts-related boards. We welcome her to the panel. Thanks for being here, Jill. And Jay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to leave you out. Let me get your information here. Jay Everett is a landscape architect and certified planner with diverse experience in master planning, construction documents, and details. Now, Jay's recent experience includes project management for Hamilton Springs. It's the first transit-oriented development approved in Middle Tennessee, and the downtown Dixon revitalization project. Jay serves on the board of Transit Now Nashville and is an active member of ULI and the Nashville Civic Design Center. Jay is an advocate for the application of smart growth principles and is passionate about incorporating sustainable practices into all areas of real estate development. So please put your hands together and welcome our next panelist, please. We will go ahead and hear from Ms. Diana Stevens first.
I'm looking for my technical assistant here. I thought we were doing something really good and we've had to bypass the system. I appreciate being able to be here today because General Services has been working with building operations, and the effect, everything we do every day has an effect on what's going on for our customer. It's been about 10 years actually since we started managing facilities. And when we first started, we were really focused on providing high performance buildings for our customers. And then in 2008, when Mayor Dean made three decisions, it had a huge impact on what we do. The first was to commission the Green Building Report. We participated in that by providing some staffing. The next, which was huge for us, was that he moved construction management under General Services. At the time, we were managing about 50 buildings, providing services, and so our mission changed. And then, in the middle of a construction project that had been started by the previous administration, he challenged us to provide a LEED Silver certified building with the Howard project that we were working on. Every decision that we make it with being a good steward in mind. Our goal is to make decisions in a way that will benefit our customers with low impact on the environment and to provide efficient building operations. Our projects are staffed by a select group of folks that strive to listen to the customer, to learn from other folks, and then to lead by example. We started with the standardization of building operations that has now developed into some standard specifications for LEED certification. We just in the last couple weeks have completed a draft of some landscape design and best practices that we'll include in the projects that we're working on. We are excited about the effect of the LEED requirement in how we manage buildings and the end product. Today, I am going to share 3 clips. We're currently completing a project that we are calling a communication project to folks in the community as well as our customers. And it is focused on how the built environment can be used to affect behavior modification and to lead folks to focus on healthy living. We've actually partnered with the health department on the Fulton campus, and that's the project we're going to start with right now.
Sustainability at the Howard Office Building began by transforming a 100-plus-year-old historical hall into a LEED Silver certified sustainability showpiece for the Fulton campus and Nashville. The Howard Office Building is now a hub for vital municipal services and the benchmark for our future LEED certified efforts. To achieve LEED Silver certification, solar rooftop panels were installed that can be monitored in the lobby. Only native plants were used, and storm runoff water was reused. Day lighting controls, occupancy sensors, dimmable ballasts, and T5 bulbs all help reduce lighting energy. Regional materials were mandated, utilizing these ceramic tiles from Cookeville, Tennessee. Howard Office Building also has updated HVAC equipment and ventilation systems and utilizes low VOC paints, adhesives, and glues. You can see everything General Services did to achieve LEED Silver certification by touring the Howard Office Building in person, on the web, mobile web, apps, or interactive kiosks.
The Goodlettsville community loved their library. They packed into every square foot. They needed a new, larger library. And with General Services of Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, we did just that and created this state-of-the-art sustainable learning space. Town meetings told us our effort must reflect the rich history of this area. We captured that here on our interactive history wall and unique history-telling art surrounding the desk. But above all, this library was to be ecologically friendly. We incorporated many environmentally responsible features, including rainwater harvesting and drip irrigation. We have electric car charging stations, ample bike parking, pervious pavement, and a solar-ready roof. Around the library, patrons will find LEED plaques that explain eco-friendly efforts used throughout the building. The cleaning staff even uses green supplies, and the Discovery Gardens act as an outdoor classroom linking us to the nearby school, engaging students as well as adults with experiential learning. Our joint efforts have created a gem, a statement to the community's past and a promise to its future as a world-class, sustainable educational experience for generations to come.
The biggest rainfall in 140 years ravaged our city, flooding out 2,700 businesses, including this car dealership on Charlotte Pike. Would you ever believe it would become a LEED Silver certified police precinct and the gathering place for this revitalized community? The West Precinct needed a new facility, and Mayor Carl Dean's administration had the vision to repurpose the car dealership. They created a 2,300 square foot working energy sustainable complex that includes a badly needed community room and an outdoor meeting space. In fact, early on in the process, Nashville's Department of General Services involved the surrounding community in the precinct design, which led to approval of the all-natural woods used in the facade. General Services was also committed to earning LEED Silver certification. This included a white roof to reflect heat, pervious services to reap stormwater out of the sewer system, energy-efficient light fixtures controlled by motion sensors, and Energy Star appliances and equipment. The precinct was also built 2 feet higher to avoid possible future flooding. There are special features like green wall fences, electric car stations, even wall cladding to prevent equipment scraping. The West Precinct is a win for the police department, the community, and Nashville's sustainability program.
Next we'll hear from Kim Hartley Hawkins.
Thanks. Good to be here with you today. I'm going to kind of walk around a little bit as we talk, but as Diana really hit a little bit more on buildings, I'm going to move to the outside and talk a little bit more about complete streets and kind of what that means for our community. And first of all, a lot of you know that in October of 2010, the mayor signed an executive order for complete streets. And the exact language for that order is on the screen, giving full consideration to the accommodation of the transportation needs of all users, that's all ages and all abilities, including those traveling by private vehicle, mass transit, foot, and bicycle. But I figure there's probably a lot more interesting ways of understanding complete streets rather than reading it in black and white. And so just looking to see what some of those complete streets might look like everybody else who talks about this, there are images of Copenhagen, there are images of Vancouver, there are images of New York. It's great to have those models to look at. But as we look at complete streets and the ability of streets to really serve our built environment, if you look at a downtown, an average downtown can sometimes have over 1/3 of the entire land area in our streets. So it's a huge opportunity. And in a lot of ways, I think the idea here with streets really serving almost like as a skeleton for our overall system, it's the bones of the system. And over 470 different municipalities throughout the United States have passed some form of complete streets legislation. So we're really just kind of joining in with what a lot of other places are doing. But the idea of really making these places not just accommodating all of those forms of transportation, but the real goal is to encourage and promote people to want to walk, to want to bicycle, so that we really are having active transportation and healthy communities. this is another one, the buffered bike lanes in Copenhagen. Being there is pretty amazing because you really do get run down by bicycles, which is a pretty great thing. And as we kind of looked at the idea of complete streets, we really kind of challenged ourselves and said, well, isn't there something more? I mean, is that really complete? Just because a street serves all of those different types of transportation, does that really make it a complete street? And again, that idea of those bones being so critical, but how many ways do you kind of add onto those bones? We need more than just a skeleton to make the body. So the idea with challenging ourselves along that line was to say, what if we add green? What if we take additional systems to kind of add to the street to really make it maybe what we like to refer to as a more complete street? With the idea that if we add green and we add sustainability into that same right-of-way that takes up 1/3 of our downtowns, that we start adding in that additional layer of kind of our respiratory system, the thing that kind of adds breath to our cities and the lungs of the city. And so through the idea of adding green streets and adding ways for our stormwater to be managed, do we really offer a more complete picture? And the idea of a green street is really the idea that we're mimicking nature's hydrology, that we're providing a way for stormwater to infiltrate or evapotranspirate so that we're accommodating most of the stormwater that falls on a site within that site. And even the idea of how do we accommodate that when we have already very tight rights-of-ways? How do we accommodate something like a small pedestrian bulb that really can accommodate a great amount of the stormwater that's provided within that right-of-way? And we're looking at more and more. These opportunities have really been explored a lot on a commercial level, and we have many, many examples of that. And Metro Water Services has a website that identifies a lot of those LID solutions. But how do we do that within the public right-of-way? And then we said, okay, is that really enough if we do all the forms of transportation and we add that additional layer, that additional system of the respiratory system? What about if we add art? Does that really make it even a more complete street? And so looking at the idea of incorporating public art, and I like to think of that as the circulatory system, because I think art makes our blood run a little faster, and sometimes we can get really passionate about it, and we can fall in love with art. So the idea of public art really being a really critical part of really making maybe a most complete street, of kind of trying to get all of these different systems overlaid together. And so what does that look like, and how do we kind of integrate that? We certainly have a public art policy in Nashville, but what happens when we integrate that into our street systems? How does that enrich our lives so that all of that, and if we can fit all of those systems together? And so I think that those are some of the things that we're working on, and kind of where are we in Nashville right now? Well, as we move towards that idea of complete streets, many of you may not know, in the last 3 years, we actually doubled our paved bikeway infrastructure from about 150 miles to over 300 miles of paved bicycle infrastructure. We're not satisfied just with that. Last year, we were named a Bronze City, bicycle-friendly city, community. But I will say that as part of the BPAC, we're challenging ourselves to try and get a silver designation by 2015. It's a huge effort, but if we can put all of these things together towards those ideas of active communities, it makes a difference for all of us. We have examples in Nashville. The idea of complete streets is not new. It didn't start in 2010 because there was an executive order. If you've been on Belmont Boulevard, if you've been on Shelby, if you've been on Murphy Road, if you've been on Rosa Parks, those are complete streets. They also probably tend to be the places where if you're a runner or you're a cyclist, those are the places where you want to go first because they're the most comfortable, they're the most safe, and that's really what it's all about. So Music Row, the Roundabout, DeMundbrun, again, all examples of complete streets, and some of which have also incorporated public art already. What I'm going to talk just a tiny bit about is a few projects where we really very consciously were trying to integrate several of those systems. The first is Dedrick Street, known as kind of the first green street. really in the southeast from the research that we could tell when we did it. This was the mayor's first capital improvement project of his administration. This was also right after the Green Ribbon Report had come out. So it was like, okay, what are we going to do differently to kind of say that this is a different kind of city? Nashville's a different kind of city, and we're going to do things in a little different way. One of the really interesting things about Dedrick that I think has application to a lot of our streets is this was a retrofit project. So this was not one where it was a green field and we were starting over. It was something where we had something we had to be able to transform it. So this is just one little piece down at the corner by 6th that shows kind of what the actual streetscape looked like before. The little gray dots were the little 4x4 tree planters along there, the street lights, and then the street lights. What you see is kind of, this is the plan for what was done on Dedrick Street at that end. And part of what you see here is there was a 700% increase in the pervious surface area that really allowed the street to start really absorbing the stormwater, both from the sidewalk as well as the streets. We did calculations for Dedrick Street and actually found that 1.2 million gallons of stormwater was being diverted from the combined sewer overlay system. Dedrick Street right in the middle of that combined sewer, which means your sanitary and stormwater is all going together to be treated. So the idea of taking 1.2 million gallons out of our stormwater system means that those facilities are working less. And then the idea, Diana kind of talked about this, but it's good to let people know that you're doing it when you're doing it, because I think part of it is the education of people about what it is you're doing and how that works, and how it works for the health of our communities, not just of us as being active residents, but actually healthy communities, that layering of those different systems together. So there are panels along the street that kind of tell some of the story about what's going on Dedrick Street and what the Green Street means to it. But again, ultimately, it's about the idea of providing a street that's comfortable and that's safe. There is, very interestingly, many of you may not know this, but Dedrick Street is also planned, those pedestrian bulb outs are actually planned to have kiosk. Some of those great flower carts and the coffee carts and things like that you've seen in some of the images before. And that might be something that we need to really readdress because it's planned for it. There's electrical and water in place for that to happen, to continue to add additional activity onto Dedrick Street. And then the second one is KVB, or sorry, I do that so often, Korean Veterans Boulevard. It's a lot easier just to say KVB. And a lot of us knew it as Gateway, and then before that we knew it as Franklin. So it's gone through a history over the last few years. And KVB was really the second one of the green streets that was designed. It'll be the last one to open. It should be opening sometime next month. But really kind of critical piece, it forms that south face of the convention center. And with the roundabout that you see right there, this just kind of shows it in plan. So it's kind of reimagining that area from 4th to 8th. And you see it in the bottom slide in a view from September. But this one, we had the wide right-of-way. We were actually able to take the idea of the green street, which we had done at Dedrick Street, but we were able to really kind of kick it up a notch. So we have a lot more opportunities for green in this one. And this one also includes, the orange kind of indicates the idea of public art. This is going to receive Metro's 1% for art money. Where that is right now, semi-finalists have been determined as of December, and in April, a decision will be made by the Metro Arts Commission in the public art process for an artist to design for that roundabout. And then just a little bit about what that cross-section is and how this works. You see that bottom cross-section, it's 136-foot right-of-way. So this street's providing 24-foot wide sidewalks with a good portion of that, 1/3 of that really providing that stormwater need of being able to take the water off of the sidewalk and off of the street. There are bike lanes there, median, and then what you see at the top is kind of just showing how the stormwater works. The blue dots kind of where those inlets are along the street. There's some pretty good grade along KVB as well, and so there are also stepped weirs to really be able to accommodate that stormwater, allow the infiltration as much as possible, but allow it to kind of pass through almost like as a daisy chain. The calculations on this street, again, we were able to kind of ramp that up a little bit from a stormwater standpoint, 3.2 million gallons of stormwater being taken out of the system. This is not within the combined sewer, but it is in an area that's very underserved from a standpoint of having a storm sewer system. It also adds a lot of trees, a lot of vegetation, again, trying to make our city a little bit healthier. And this is kind of some of the under construction pictures. And then the last one that I kind of want to hit on is 28th, 31st. And that, this one has a real social added value that the mayor hit on this morning. It's the connector between Centennial Park and Hadley Park. It's the connector between North Nashville and West Nashville. It's the connection between Vanderbilt and TSU. It just does so many things and heals so many places that were really broken in our community. And so I think there are a lot of people in this community that are really excited about that. It was a great celebration and one that was a long time coming when it opened last fall. And one of the pieces that really is part of that healing is the public art. The artist David Dahlquist did a piece called Thread and Needle. And the idea was, again, kind of knitting together the community from the West Nashville and the North Nashville community, and doing that literally with this idea of thread. And the community developed this whole series of quilt patterns that then became a part of the fencing that separated the passageway from the railroad. And at the terminus points where there are bus stops, there are also these beautiful needle bus stops along the way. Now, this connection also includes a transit aspect in that the University Connector by MTA was started to, again, connect all of these different universities together for the first time in that cross-town connection. One of the other things that it did do, there is only one thing that I noticed in Gil's presentation this morning. It wasn't exactly correct. We do have one protected bike lane, and it's here. It's on 28th Avenue, and this was the first one that was done. And I'll tell you, the interesting thing about this was the last one designed of the three that I just talked about. KVB is the last one to open, but this was the last one designed. And the design of this came right after our office had just visited New York City and just kind of spent the weekend in New York looking at all of these incredible bike lanes. And we said, we have got to find a way to do it here. On 28th Avenue, it was very, very tight, but we were really determined to get that first protected bike lane. Now, I will say that this has provided a lot of inspiration. Most of the things that are on our boards right now all have protected bike lanes. We're looking at that right now for the Gulch Greenway. The South of Broadway master plan includes several opportunities for additional buffered bike lanes where the bicyclist is completely protected from vehicles. And so this shows just a little bit about how that right-of-way works and the idea of that protected bike lane. When you get down to the street, you'll see that you kind of come in right at the intersection, but for the most part, you have that separated bike lane. Part of what we're seeing is cyclists across the city, even your most avid cyclists, they want to be safe. And the idea of the protected bike lane brings a lot more people out cycling. It dramatically reduces, like a 90% reduction in the number of accidents because you have a buffered bike lane. So the idea of that safety and protection and comfort is really pretty critically important. And then here you see just a few examples of the street right now in the middle of winter and some of those stormwater management tools that occur both in the median and on the sides to be able to accommodate that water. And then very quickly, as just an overall symbol, this kind of shows how that, what I would call the most complete street, kind of comes together, integrating the public art, the green street, and the complete streets ideas.
Thank you very much, Kim. Now we'd like to hear from Jay Everett, please.
Thank you. Up next. Okay. Yes, my name is Jay Everett. I'm also a landscape architect and planner with Lowson Associates here in Nashville. We've been here for about 30 years, and in Metro we've done a lot of greenway work, but I'm here to talk to you today about Hamilton Springs, which is a project in Lebanon, and we call it the first transit-oriented development in Middle Tennessee. But that's just because that's what we call it today. If this were the turn of the last century, we would just call it development. So it's not really the first or the newest, it's just the first one that we call a transit-oriented development. And it's along the commuter rail line, the Music City Star. So I'm going to breeze through my first few slides here pretty quickly. They're sort of general, but we've had such great presentations already today. A lot of this has been covered. I'm going to define transit-oriented development for you. It's mixed use, it's walkable, it balances transit-supportive density with the scale of the adjacent community, and is mixed income. A little bit of information about point number 3 is you need a minimum level of density to support transit ridership, and that's really what TOD is about, is doing development around transit in ways that increase transit ridership. Number 2 is probably the most important, this concept of walkability. It almost encompasses mixed use and density and mixed income. This is a slide that I took from a study that was published in 2005 in Environment and Behavior. It talks about, you may remember from your Psychology 101 class, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, this is the hierarchy of walking needs. And it's about the decision process that you go through as a human being when you're trying to decide if you're going to walk somewhere. And the first thing seems pretty obvious, is feasibility. Is it even possible to walk to the destination? You can't really walk to Australia or the moon. So that one's kind of pretty obvious. Accessibility is the next thing that you want to think about in your mind, and that has to do with still distance. Also, it starts to get into things about the environment. What's the status of the sidewalk network? How complete is it between where I am now and where I want to go? Really, now in these top 3, we're getting into what we as design professionals can do a great deal to affect safety. I think this is of primary importance, is if I'm going to make a decision about where I'm going to walk, are there liquor stores and pawn shops and broken windows and people who are sort of threatening looking, loitering around? Those sort of things affect your decision whether or not you're going to walk. And there are things that you can do with the design of the environment to affect that. Then comfort, of course. An analogy for this might be if safety is a battleship, okay, you feel pretty safe on a battleship. It's not very comfortable. Comfortable is more like a cruise ship. So we as designers, we introduce amenities into the space, street trees, on-street parking that sort of separates you from the vehicular traffic, traffic calming measures to slow the traffic down. These things not only affect safety, but also your comfort level when you're in those spaces. What sort of benches and other sorts of amenities are present. And then pleasurability, and this has to do with the liveliness of the spaces that you're going through. Is it a nice walk? Is it something that you look forward to doing? And the architecture, the scale of the spaces that you'll be passing through has a lot to do with that. So that's sort of in the back of the designer's mind as we're designing these spaces. I won't spend very long on this, but there are 3 emerging trends which are the reason why density is no longer a dirty word. Urbanity, increasing urbanity. Our urban centers in America are seeing a level of reinvestment that it hasn't seen since World War II. Placemaking is another phenomenon that's taking place, and that really has more to do not only with urban areas, but also suburban areas. They're densifying, and they're under pressure to become places of their own, not just bedroom communities. And then finally, also increased public interest in transit and other forms of, or modes of travel, bus rapid transit, rail transit, but as has been pointed out before, every trip of that kind starts with walking or biking. Changing demographics also play into market forces that are creating interest in transit-oriented development. Increasing immigration, people who've lived other places expect good transit service. Aging baby boomer population, they're realizing that they don't need a 5 or 6 bedroom house, nor do they want to clean it or pay someone else to mow the lawn. They want to spend more of their time and energy and money on an active lifestyle now that they're empty nesters. Family sizes are getting smaller, which means you don't need as big of a house if you only have 1 or 2 kids. Gen X and millennial lifestyle preferences are also factoring in. It's very different at their age. now as they're starting to have families compared to the boomers who came before. So now here we are talking about the specifics of Hamilton Springs, which I mentioned is in Lebanon. This is a project in West Lebanon. You can see on the map, do we have a, there we go. So this is downtown Lebanon. This is downtown Nashville. The green line is the Music City Star, and this yellow polygon represents Hamilton Springs. And this was a GIS parcel analysis where we looked at parcels that were 50 acres or larger on both sides of the rail to try and answer the question, why hasn't someone already done a transit-oriented development? And what we found was our client's site was uniquely positioned in that it had right-of-way on US Highway 70, which is a 5-lane state route, and also right-of-way on both sides of the Music City Star. It's also approximately equidistant between 2 existing stations, so this would not require moving a station, closing a station. It could be a new station of its own because of its distance to the others. All of this was important. I should mention there was an original master plan for this property, and it was done before the Music City Star began operating. And our client came back to us in 2009 and said these single-family, large lot parcels just aren't selling. So give me something else. And we started doing our research, and it's important to point out too that a lot of the conversation about transit-oriented development, we have to give credit to organizations like the Civic Design Center, who really we can't talk enough about their role as a cheerleader, because years before we came along, there was an AIA 150 exercise, community visioning, where they talked about the train. There was student projects from UT and Vanderbilt Business School, UT Architecture program that talked about transit-oriented development in Lebanon. So when we came forward with our proposal, a lot of the community leaders said, oh, we know what this is. So then we get into, okay, we're going to do a transit-oriented development. I should also mention it was very important to engage other entities like the railroad, RTA, and the MPO, who were all very supportive, and we brought them in very early on the process. But conventional zoning, as already been mentioned, doesn't do a very good job of creating spaces that are sympathetic to that hierarchy of walking needs. Conventional zoning gives you your use, and then your floor area ratio, and your setbacks, and your parking, and your building height, but it doesn't really tell you much about what that space is going to feel like when you're finished. And a form-based code is superior in that regard because it gets into those ideas of safety and comfort. We actually used a local example when we were looking into a template to use. We think the planning department here in Nashville did an excellent job with the downtown code. And since developers were already going to have to be getting accustomed to using that model, we said, you know, why reinvent the wheel? So I actually think it's easier to use than some other models that are out there like Smart Code. So this is a master plan of the property. There are 4 sub-districts, each with its own form-based style of zoning. The first is the village center, and Kim, this photo should look familiar. This is some of Hawkins' excellent work in Green Hills. But this gives you a good idea of what we're envisioning for the village center. It's the most dense because it's near the train station. There's the most vertical mixing of uses. Of course, in the village center in Hamilton Springs, you can actually go up to 6 stories. But here, it shows you what the street side zone can feel like. You've got room for cafe-style seating, room for trees, room for all sorts of amenities. You're protected by the on-street parking. It's very comfortable. This is the type of environment that we're hoping to create in the village center. The next area, as you move out, so all of that is within a 5-minute walk of the train station, so that's about a quarter of a mile. As you move away from the train station, you'll move into the village areas, which have homes that are closer together, on-street parking, community open spaces, front porches. And we didn't want to zone anyone out. There's a lot of places where you can't have a home-based business because of your zoning. And in cases where you're going to have a low parking demand, we wanted to make sure that we allowed for that in these areas. The next space is the village commercial. I'll show you. This is along Highway 70. This is more of your conventional highway commercial. However, you'll see We require that there be designated pedestrian paths to all of the doors from adjacent sidewalks, lush landscaping. So even though we are accommodating the automobile in this area, we're still thinking about mode share and giving the pedestrian as much attention. And then walkable suburban, this is the transitional areas as we move out away into the surrounding suburban context. This is another local project that we used when we had this conversation with the community. We thought it was important to point out that this isn't a foreign concept. We're just taking components of other types of development around Middle Tennessee. This is West Haven and Franklin. And we're assembling them in a slightly different way to be transit supportive. So in these areas, most of the access is from the front instead of from an alleyway. You'll have larger homes, but they're still closer together, lots of front porches, but some of these, the backs open up onto open space. Phase 1 is under construction right now. It involves 396 apartment units and a complete streets-style boulevard and square. This is a typical elevation of what some of these buildings will look like. This is a site photo from August, and then just the other day in January, you can see we've already got our curb and gutter in, and you can see the apartments coming up in the background here, so we're pretty excited about that. It's really great to see these blobs of color that were just conceptual now taking shape as streets and blocks. We've talked, Kim covered complete streets very well, so I'll just mention that the importance of this street side zone where we've prescribed an area for furnishings, an area for people to walk through, and then the area in front of the stores for additional landscaping, seating, and door swings. The station area concept will, parking-wise, be very similar to some of the other stations that are already existing. You'll have the same number of parking, but we've really tried to pull the buildings out to create a different feel. Much less park and ride, much more train station. I've arrived at a place. We have some sustainability features as well, bioswales, porous parking bays, electric vehicle charging stations, etc. And here's an aerial photograph you can see from August. You can see the boulevard taking shape, the square taking shape, and this is the area where the first phase apartment units are going. This is a conceptual rendering of what we envision the square to look like when it's built out. The train station would just be beyond this point. You can see that vertical mixing of uses. And we have a design review committee in place, but the idea is that we want to encourage diversity of design. We don't really want it to appear like Disney World when we're done. We want it to be a real place. So this is the master plan today. And this is another conceptual rendering of what it might be like to arrive at Hamilton Springs. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you all for your presentations. We have a couple of questions for the panel, and anyone can speak up who wants to. I wonder if you can speak to some specific health benefits of the projects you're working on with healthy building design, healthy street design, and healthy neighborhood design.
I want to mention one real quickly because it's information that the CDC has put together. Interestingly enough, and it doesn't come as a huge surprise, but there is a direct inverse correlation to the number of bike lanes in a city and the obesity rate. And this is if you look across the country. So it's kind of like if you build them, they will ride, I guess. And so I think that that's a huge step as we kind of go to approach the obesity. So that's one great thing.
I think there are a lot of corollary examples of the benefits to public health for the type of projects that we're talking about, but I would go back to the slide that I showed about the hierarchy of walking needs. If it's not possible to walk, people aren't going to walk. And a lot of what we do as designers is just eliminate barriers to that. So I think that's where a lot of our work is today, is removing barriers to people actually having active, healthy lifestyles.
You know, the thing that we've seen with the buildings that we're designing and the locations has been that in the past you could drive up to a public building and go right to the door. And so the campuses that we're designing and the buildings that we're designing, we're really focused on providing the appropriate parking, but giving folks an opportunity to walk into the building and have a distance. And also what we've seen directly in the last 2 years and documented with some surveys recently is that folks that have been assigned to the Fulton campus have an opportunity to have access during their lunch hours before or after work to use a facility, the exercise facility. And in providing that, we've seen groups develop into communities. That same group of folks, or in a similar manner, we are providing access to public transportation during lunch hours, before and after work. And so in order to get folks to change their, from the time they get to work to the time they leave, we've focused on providing a different narrative for them. So we have the electric vehicle chargers, they park in a garage, they walk to the building, we've got seating outside, we've got a nice area to get away. They get into the building, they have the opportunity to use interior stairways. And then just most recently, we have seen a group of folks start a Weight Watchers program. So that community is building. We're changing that narrative that we've all drive up, park, don't walk through the day, go in, sit down. So it's good.
Thank you. Next question is, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. It's what are the obstacles to Nashville becoming the healthiest city in the South? I would say what are the things that, given the sense of urgency that Mr. Peloso urged us to have and the health challenges facing us, what are the obstacles to us moving faster?
I think one of them, I think the biggest obstacle is the absence of mass transit here in a really meaningful way, meaning specifically the East-West connector. I think the opportunity of having a true BRT through our city and being able to connect along the Western Corridor to East Nashville, I think would be the most dramatic change of behavior and dramatically improve the idea of active transportation, and I think it would make a huge difference. So that would be mine.
I think, yeah, I totally agree. I think there's still not very many opportunities to have that sort of lifestyle where maybe if you're a young parent with a child, where you can walk with your child to school, and then, you know, maybe you're in a place like Hamilton Springs and you can then walk from the school to board a train or a BRT and go to work, you know, at Vanderbilt or downtown. And then you're getting your exercise, like Gil mentioned, that 30 minutes of aerobic activity a day without even realizing it's just a part of your lifestyle. And there just really aren't that many opportunities yet because of lack of transit, lack of connectivity, lack of other modes that are available to people.
I'm going to open it up to there's some great questions here, but I see some hands up. I see several hands up, and I will go from right to your left to your right. John.
Is the Vietnam Veterans Boulevard going to have bike lanes?
Yes, Korean Veterans Boulevard does have bike lanes on both sides. They're 5-foot wide bike lanes on both sides.
This may be the wrong panel to be answering this question, but in the past year I've developed sound sensitivity in my ear, and so I've become very hyper alert to noise. And as I think about the future, with cities becoming more dense, more activities occurring in smaller areas, including more sleeping in the downtown area with more apartments being added and condos. Are there discussions in your professional worlds about noise pollution? I've been to places like Hong Kong and Taiwan where noise pollution is a very serious health issue. And I've also been recently to Montreal where it was a very bike-friendly city, walking-friendly city. I was very impressed with that. But it was also a very loud city. And so I was wondering are there discussions about noise pollution in your circles?
as it relates to facilities, we have a staff person right now that's working with an international group to do a study on the sounds and the noise pollution that we have in buildings, particularly in the conference areas, and the acoustical accountability that we have. And we've just started working on that project. So we'd be glad to give an update, or you might look for that out on the website.
I could speak from experience as a downtown resident to some of that, particularly in Nashville. My wife and I live in Hope Gardens, which is a neighborhood next to Bicentennial Mall and the Farmers Market. And it's surprisingly quiet. I grew up in rural Mississippi, so I have a very high standard for quiet. And the noise really hasn't been the issue, especially when I'm inside. We have double pane windows, and that seems to keep a lot of the noise out, even though we're right next door to a smokeless tobacco factory. But as far as light pollution, we have blackout blinds and curtains, and that seems to be enough, because I also have a higher standard for darkness when sleeping. But I found it to be very livable. And as far as noise from transportation, I think you can get a lot more people on one bus than you can in multiple automobiles, and cyclists are much more quiet than any motorized vehicle. So I think multimodal is definitely the way to go to address those issues.
Thank you. We got here Dr. Thomas Trudeau, and then we'll go back up to the corner.
I have a question about the 48% or the 52% or so of households in Nashville who make below $50,000 a year. And in some of these things I'm seeing in the examples, they're very nice, but if you're talking about doing something in the Gulch, and the Gulch has this free bus coming from downtown, and it costs, buying a condo in the Gulch is like $300,000 and up. And that for the over half of our population who will never live in one of those communities, what are we doing to make neighborhoods, low and middle income neighborhoods, accessible with things like sidewalks? And I see complete streets, but you have to drive to get to the complete street to walk around downtown.
That is a great point, and one that, I'm sorry, it couldn't be addressed in the earlier, but part of what it is, and it gets back to what Gil said earlier, which is about creating a network. And so each of these examples that I've just given are examples within an overall master plan system. So we do have a complete system of master planned sidewalks and bikeway facilities that go throughout our entire county, and in fact have been coordinated with the adjoining counties with the MPO. So it's not just, even though I agree what I presented were these little segments, they're part of a much broader network that does go throughout the city. So there are bike lanes, shared lanes, greenway systems that all connect together, and that's part of what the BPAC, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, also works on, are making those connections so that exactly what you're saying can happen, and that you can connect people from every community in Nashville to the other communities. The B-cycles and the green bike systems have also played into that as well, being positioned in a number of different locations to allow access for all. I think that's a really excellent question.
Okay, back corner.
I was particularly interested with the 28th and 31st connector, the bike lane, which is raised up to the same level as the pedestrian walkway. I was interested in whether this was a model as far as limited space constraints, or whether this is a model that you would like to see implemented further within Nashville.
That's another good question. We looked at so many different possibilities there. The biggest issue on 28th, 31st, and don't you love that? Only in Nashville does 28th turn into 31st, and does 11th turn into 12th. We're at the corner of 11th and 12th. Anyway, I love that. But part of what happens, as we looked at this, we looked at a number of different examples of how to accommodate it. We were incredibly constrained on right-of-way. If many of you might remember that 28th, where it comes out there by Centennial Park, that land had to be acquired from HCA. There were a number of different acquisitions that had to be made. And so what we ended up doing is we liked the idea. We felt like cyclist chances were better if there were a conflict with a pedestrian rather than a conflict with a vehicle. So we put the bike at that higher level with the pedestrian. That is not necessarily the way that every separated cycle track will be done in Nashville, but it's one way that worked really well for that project. It is being looked at for a couple of other methods of doing it like that, but there are a number of other ways of the completely buffered two-way cycle track. That's part of what's being looked at in the gulch to make the connector from the front to back in the gulch. So there are a lot of different ways that it can be done. That happened to be the one that could work best within the constraints that we had.
Oh, yes, one.
You mentioned briefly the light pollution and that you use the shades. My concern is that with the additional bikeways, the additional sidewalks, are we going to have to increase the lighting? And if so, are they trying to use sustainable lighting? Are they trying to direct all of the lighting down rather than to add to the light pollution, since we're very close to one of the major flyways? And that was not addressed in any of the plans when you spoke about it, so I'm just wondering if that's one of your considerations.
It is, and there's a couple different things I can answer on that. Like, for instance, on Dedrick Street, we had very limited electrical capacity in that entire street, very limited. And it's one of the reasons that those sidewalks felt so unsafe, is because they weren't lit. Part of what was done is there were street lights being put in. It's the standard Metro street light, but the additional lights were added. The pedestrian lights are all LED lights. They were actually custom LED lights. Each one of those has the equivalency of one 60-watt incandescent bulb, and yet they're lighting that entire area. On 28th Avenue, we did look at that. The positioning, these are all great questions and so hard to get into the details when you have just a couple minutes, but look at it. Those lights are positioned so that they light the bikeway, sidewalk, and the vehicular way together. And I can't remember the type of light. It's like a high induction. I'm sorry, I can't remember the specifics of that, but Metro Public Works is looking at that. It's incredibly sustainable, and it does have, it is shielded so that it does come down. I can't tell you whether it meets the requirement of dark sky, but it is a heavily shielded, very different than the typical standards that Metro had used in the past.
I think that's where a lot of things are going, is dark sky compliance. Hamilton Springs, the light fixtures we chose for that were cutoff fixtures. We don't allow floodlights. You know, they're basically glare bombs on the side of buildings that make you feel less safe even though there's more light. We recently completed a study with MTSU. We redid their entire campus lighting, and all of it went towards, they didn't have the money to do LED, but they chose fixtures that could convert easily to LED once they do have the money. And they also are cutoff fixtures that direct the light down. So less light, but more even, makes you feel safer.
Yes.
This might be towards the leadership of Transit Now, but anyone can answer. My question is buy-in from businesses. You know, I think about Smith Springs Road, Anderson Road down in Antioch. I think about the families that live in all those apartments having to cross the street to that grocery store. And there are a lot of corner markets in these food deserts around Nashville, but they don't exactly have safe sidewalks, or they don't have really pretty, inviting landscape architecture. How can we get buy-in from businesses to be a part of this engagement, or, you know, connectivity or network linking? I also think of that as social relationships and getting involved. Can you speak to how to get business buy-in?
Yeah, I think communication and knowing your neighbors is really important. For a business, it's going to be return on investment. They want to know that by improving the appearance of their business, they're going to actually generate more revenue. That's just where their incentives are and where their interests lie. And there are ways of demonstrating that, yes, if you improve the facade of your building, if you add landscaping and street trees, you will actually recoup that investment pretty quickly.
I have a really, this is a tiny question, but it's just a follow-up to the 28th, 31st. How come you didn't do like they do in Copenhagen, or at least I recall from Copenhagen, where you've got the street level and then you've got the bike path that's sort of like half as tall as the regular pedestrian sidewalk? Too much money, or you didn't have
nope,
space?
that was one of the options that was evaluated, and some of that ends up getting back to, we didn't have another 6 inches to give anywhere. So everything that we have on that street is what I would consider the minimal. The area along the stormwater retention areas are 4 feet wide, which we just felt like was the minimum. We couldn't go any less. And as we looked at that, we still had to provide the gutter it gets into details of cross-section, but we still had to provide the gutter, and then we had to provide that little step up, and then so it was just every increment. If it took out an extra foot, we couldn't do it. And we ended up deciding that, again, the cyclist was going to be safest with the pedestrian and separated completely by that, with the landscape buffer, if you will, to separate it from the vehicle. But it was a very constrained street.
Joe, you're in charge. Apparently we have 3 more people for questions.
This question is for Kim. I really liked your slides about incorporating public art into the transportation system. What sort of initiatives are being made to do that outside of the Metro Arts Commission?
Okay, outside of the Metro, it has to be within the Metro Arts Commission because we have a % for art, and if we're incorporating public art on any public project, it has to follow the Metro Arts Commission guideline for public art. So officially, it can't happen outside of the Metro Arts Commission if it's art within a public building or a public right-of-way. Interestingly, on 28th Avenue, those dollars were not dollars generated by the 2831st connector because public works projects don't go to the % for art. So those were dollars that were accumulated from other built projects that were aggregated and then allowed to be used for the 28th Avenue connector. Did that answer your question?
I guess so, that it's pretty limited.
It's very limited. If it happens in a public right-of-way or in a public building, it must go through the Metro Arts Commission process. So if there is some other entity that wants to provide public art, you can work with as a public-private partnership, but it must follow the Metro Arts Commission guideline.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 more.
I was wondering if Diana could speak to, and I'm not sure if the General Services Department deals with our public schools, but so much of the built environment that our children spend their time in is inside the school. And it seems that in our office building context, you were thinking about, low emitting carpets and paints and, incorporating, artwork and getting murals up on the walls and more trees. What work is being done in Metro to make the school environments, I even think of the aspect of just mental health, the daylight you can see, the art that you can see, to make those be really nice built environments that promote health.
General Services is not, we do not work with the schools and don't manage their projects. But not to be misleading, we are working on one school building right now, and we are using those same design standards and specifications. The building will be LEED Silver certified, and everything will fall within the same, but we don't work on school buildings. We don't provide services for them. Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes.
Hello. I heard that, about the hundreds of gallons of water that you have been diversified in the downtown area, and I would like to know if does it means that in the future, if we will have another like a flood, like big water, big raining like we had in the 2010, we'll never have a flood in the downtown area anymore. That's my question. Thank you.
That is a good question, and I will say that each one of these projects individually is a drop in the bucket, if you'll pardon the pun. But Dedrick Street, you mentioned that in the relationship of the flood of May of 2010. Dedrick Street was completed in October of 2009, and in May 1st of 2010, I can't tell you how many times I went and drove down Dedrick Street because I was worried to death about it. And with all of the infiltration that was possible in that street, at no point, and I drove it, my office is a few blocks away from it, I was checking on it that whole weekend, at no point did I ever see the stormwater go over the stormwater facilities that we have and actually go into those drains. It was just remarkable how much water was actually infiltrating. I can't tell you that that's going to happen all the time. It's not. But what happens is the more and more that we can change this impervious area to pervious area, the more opportunity we have to turn our land back into the sponge that it was meant to be, and the less of the runoff we have. So I would say it's increment after increment after increment that makes that happen. We will, if you have the rains of May of 2010, there will still be flooding. There is no avoiding that. But we can make a huge difference for those more intermittent rain opportunities.
Our closer today is Rick Bernhardt, Director of Planning for Metro Nashville, and now the lead on the Nashville 2040 plan. I can tell you all sorts of great things about Rick. He's been a town planner for over 40 years, and he's really focused on creating sustainable communities, neighborhoods, and places through the use of traditional planning and design principles. These techniques have been used to develop community-wide and project-specific master plans. Mayor Dean recently charged Rick with the development of Nashville 2040 General Plan to guide community development and investment decisions for the upcoming 25 years. Very exciting. Rick worked in Orlando. He received the initial Catherine Brown Award from the Congress for the New Urbanism. I didn't know that before right now. And he trained at Auburn, Ohio State, with a concentration in master planning and a concentration in housing and urban structure. Also received the Distinguished Alumni Award from the Ohio State University in 1997. Rick, thanks for being here. Thank you all for staying. Remember that there is a walk if you want to walk, and there's a reception at 4. And I'm looking at the clock up here panicking because but this clock hasn't been set back yet. So we're not in that bad. We're not in that bad a shape.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of close up today. Let's. What I want to do is provide us an opportunity to kind of rethink what we've done and then leave us with a charge. The theme of this session has been extremely important, recognizing that the built environment includes all human-made resources and infrastructure, and it is designed to impact and support human activity. So what can we do in terms of influencing that? When you look at public health, it's not just what Dr. Paul and his staff does. It's really what we as a society can do collectively to ensure the conditions in which people live can be healthy. It's all of us. He's one component of that in the health department, but we are all part of creating a healthy community. When you look at the built and social environments and what impact they have on residents' health, what we have found today, and what we, I think, know, is the built environment includes all of the physical parts of the city, where we live, where we work. The built environment influences a person's level of physical activity. Neighborhood conditions can and do impact health by making healthy choices easy, difficult, or impossible. Public policy choices and private investment decisions shape neighborhood conditions. In looking at this and thinking about the role that planning and health have had, because there's a long history, and I'll touch on that in just a moment, it was interesting to kind of go back. This is not at all a new idea. If you go back and look at Politics, which was written about 350 years BC by Aristotle, one of his quotes was that we ought to plan the ideal of our city with an eye towards 4 considerations. The first as being the most indispensable is health. So this is not a new idea. It is something that goes back and is something that's at the very, very core of our whole society. So let's kind of look back at what we're doing, and let's remember today, because I think there's been a lot of things. If you remember, Gary Gaston kicked us off with 6 components of a healthy built environment: neighborhood design, transportation, housing, food resources, walkability, open space, and parks. Gil Penalosa followed up with a couple of challenges. One, that we build our cities for everyone, that we recreate cities for people, that the key ingredients of cities relate to pedestrian movement, cycling, public transit, and public space, that we move from talking to doing, sense of urgency, a political will, leadership, doers, public participation, that we adapt and improve ideas from all around the world. And his real final charge was for us to recharge our batteries, that he was here to help to do that as we move on. We were really inspired by some great leadership in this community. Julia Landstreet, Mark Deutschman, Sandy Bevins, all of which are leaders in this community and are to be acknowledged and appreciated for the work that they have done. I want to give many thanks to them. At lunch, we had Alice Randall talking about ADA's rules, be 3 times as good and be what you want, and the 888 approach. And this afternoon, what we began hearing was how to design a healthy city. How do we design a healthy building? How do we design healthy streets? How do we design healthy places? All of that coming together in terms of the built environment and the impact. Going back to Aristotle and looking at planning and health, the modern planning profession actually evolved out of the relationship between planning and health. Towards the end of the 19th century, what you began to see were a reaction to the cities of that day, the City Beautiful movement, the evolution of the garden suburb. Zoning evolved specifically out of a reaction to the relationship between planning and health, the lack of adequate sanitation, overcrowded tenements, the relationship between light and air and buildings, and noxious uses. All those were at the very, very core of the planning profession. And so the theme that we have, health in the built environment, is right on in terms of what we need to be doing. So what is next for Nashville? That's the question. What the mayor has charged and what we're doing is preparing as a community a look at where we want to go over the next 25 years. The effort is really a community effort. It revolves around 4 fundamental pillars of this community that are at the core of the planning effort. Metro government is involved as a provider of services and infrastructure. The Chamber of Commerce is involved in terms of economic development. The Land Trust for Tennessee is involved in terms of protecting our natural resources. And Nashville for All of Us is involved to represent and reflect the diversity that we're going to be facing over the next 25 years. That core group is supported by a steering committee that includes many of the groups that are concerned about the built environment around here, Cumberland Region Tomorrow, Transit Now, the Civic Design Center, and a number of other groups from around this community. If you go back, it's interesting as we're celebrating Metro at 50, and you go back and look at Metro 50 years ago, this was in effect a one-county region. And kind of the core of that county was clearly inside the interstate loop, if not smaller than that. If you look at what Nashville is now, and you look at what Nashville's going to be over the next 25 years, you're talking about a 13 or 14 county region, and you're talking about an urban core that may extend to all of the developable land within Davidson County, if not outside of Davidson County. You've already heard that this region's facing 1 million more people over the next 25 years. How we incorporate those people and how we build healthy environments and communities are at the core of what we do. In 25 years, we're going to be faced, this region is, with Williamson and Rutherford County that are basically the same size of Davidson County in 2000. Both of those will be over 500,000 people. You're going to see a very different demographic in 2040 than we do today. It's going to be almost as, the largest single ethnic group, at least in Davidson County in 2040, will be Latinos, with almost slightly lower, but amounts of Caucasian and African Americans following it up. The next 25 years, we're going to be faced with dealing with the needs and demands of aging baby boomers and the Gen Y or millennials. Very different groups, but very similar kinds of needs as we kind of go through that. And how we react to that, how we build a sustainable, healthy environment is going to be critically important. So this process is starting. We spent the last 6 months in terms of gathering data, doing a whole series of white papers, which we'll be releasing over the next several months, and developing a process that will involve a lot of people, if not everyone in this community, and we want your involvement in particular. We will be kicking off the public part of this process in this very room a month from today, really a month from yesterday, actually, February the 16th, with a kickoff speaker here at the library. That's a Saturday, and we'll be getting the information out. Mayor Dean will be giving the charge, and former Governor Paris Glendening will be giving an overview or a challenge to us in terms of the role of the cities and the role of the region. We're going to then follow that up with a series of speakers, roughly on a 2-week increment, that will talk about the key elements and issues that we're going to face as a community as we go forward. Those include Mitch Silver talking about demographics and equity, Henry Cisneros talking about prosperity, in particular modern cities as engines of economic opportunity and social progress. We're going to have Doug Farr of Sustainable Urbanism talking about the environment. We're going to have Ellen Dunham-Jones from Georgia Tech talking about livability and how we incorporate and utilize many of the ideas that we've talked about in this session. We have Bill Fulton of Smart Growth America talk about infrastructure and the cost of sprawl. We're going to have Amy Liu from the Brookings Institute talking about regionalism. These are all opportunities to kind of come together, learn together as a community, and work forward as we try to define our vision. And so the call to action for what is next for Nashville is, I'm going to be in, are you going to be in? One follow-up from this conference will be an email to ask thoughts about the conference, but part of that question is, are you interested in being notified or part of the planning process? And if all you have to do is say yes, and we'll provide you information. We're going to have a lot of different ways to be involved in this process. We're creating a lot of social opportunities in terms of social network opportunities. Our speakers are going to be, we're going to have broadcast on Channel 3 as well as taking input and information. But the critical role of defining this community over the next 25 years will be at its very core and heart the ability to access all parts of this community and engage all parts of this community and help the community understand what challenges we have and come to solutions together as we move forward. And we've got some opportunities and we've got some challenges. We've had a significant amount of community planning. We're starting with that. We're incorporating that. But at the core is talking about what we want to be, what you want this community to be as we go forward in the next 25 years. So I'm going to leave you with that challenge to come, be involved. There's going to be, as I said, a lot of opportunities to be involved. And we want your participation in particular with this coalition and this group of people that are actually looking to move forward. And so with that, I want to give thanks to the Health Department for hosting this, this summit. I want to give thanks to each of you for being involved. And I want to remind you that the Civic Design Center has provided, I guess, walkable guidebooks, I guess, in terms of walking around and understanding what opportunities and great things there are in downtown. You need to get that. But also you need to be back here at 4 o'clock for the opening of their exhibit on Shaping, Building, Becoming, which will be basically from 4 to 6 o'clock right here. Anything else that you have? If not, I will say thank you very much. Thanks for being here.